And so I went to Wyoming State Prison. My first day there, I threw up one of those big coffee urns of boiling water on a guy.
Do you think getting that taste of prison at such a young age helped you later on in life when you were in prison?
So I threw a whole bunch of rolls of toilet paper under the door. It was a real tall doors there. I threw them all under there and I lit them on fire.
Do you feel mentally sane in the moment? Like, what's going through your mind?
Man, Ian, I'll be honest with you, bro. It's like you become kind of like an animal in there.
Ben McChesney spent 25 years locked up, serving time in 14 different federal prisons. After pulling off one of the biggest gun heists in his state, he went on the run to Mexico, fought his own federal cases, and survived years inside one of the most dangerous prisons in America. This is one of the wildest prison stories you'll ever hear. Ben, welcome to Locked In, man. Thanks so much for coming out here today. Did you actually fly in from Montana? Is that where you still live now? Or
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever met anyone from Montana.
No? Yeah, Matt was like wondering, like, where is Montana? He's like, I'm a little geographically challenged.
Oh, I am too. People wrote me in the comments for it.
Yeah.
But I've heard of Billings, Montana.
Okay.
That's is it cold out there right now?
It's getting chilly. It's starting to get chilly.
Is it ever warm in Montana?
Oh yeah, it's warm. It's hot. Montana has pretty much all 4 seasons.
Okay.
So you actually get a pretty good mix. It gets cold in the wintertime and snowy, but it's hot in the summertime. I mean, you can't go without AC. You're going to be dying.
Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in Montana. I mean, I grew up until I was about 10 years old in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And then we moved back to Montana. So
Why'd you guys switch?
my dad worked for Texas Instruments, and so he fixed computer systems at the time, and so they just needed someone in the northwestern sector to fix computer systems. So
so you had the hook up to those like $500 calculators they made you buy.
Yeah,
in high
he
school?
used to. He did a lot of like auto repair, like auto dealership computers. When we went to Florida, it's interesting because we were from Montana. We lived in Bozeman, Montana, right outside of Bozeman, a place called Three Forks. And when I was little, they transferred me to Florida. And it was, we're a white family from Montana. And so we're getting closer to the address that we're moving to in Florida. And they told them we have a house for you and everything. And it's, it's dark, and we're like, we're down in the hood. We were in a place called Lauderhill, which is a suburb of Fort Lauderdale. And there ain't no white people down there. I mean, it's, and so everybody's looking at this Jeep Wagoneer full of this white family, looking like some Mormons, which we were. I was raised Mormon. And so, it was pretty interesting. And like, who are these guys? And we're like, where are we at? And so, we moved right into the hood, it was pretty interesting. And so, it was a cool dynamic, we were like the only white family in a very, large area. So it was pretty wild.
What was it like to be raised Mormon?
Not too bad. It's just, the Mormon religion. I mean, they're good people. I'm not a Mormon now. Nobody in my family is a Mormon. We're all what you consider Jack Mormons that have left the church. I have a good time sometimes with missionaries and whatnot. So I lived in Mexico. I was on the run in Mexico. We can get to that. I lived down in central Mexico in the state of Guanajuato, and I lived in a little town called Yuriria. And there were Mormon missionaries. And so I would see them, and they spoke English. One of them was white. The other guy was like some kind of Spanish descent. I don't know what he was. When they'd see me, you'd see him, they'd be like, oh, shit. I'd be on my moto. And I'd see him, and I'd pull up like, hey, you guys, what's up, man? It was nice to talk to someone, that spoke fluent English and from the U.S. I'm like, man, what are you guys doing? And I'd be like, oh, man, you see them hot chicks? They're not allowed to, like, look at anything that could be sin or, on their mission. And so, I'd kind of give them a hard time. I'd be like, man, did you guys know that Joseph Smith? And I'd start telling them, a lot of the history of the church, which people don't really discuss in the Mormon church because it's kind of a, like I said, Mormons are really great people, but Joseph Smith and the way it all started. And if you really understand the full history of the church, it's kind of interesting.
What did your mom do for work?
My mom's she's a counselor. She was a school counselor up in Alaska and up in a little Indian village on the north shore of Alaska for a lot of years. And then she was on a Indian reservation in Wyoming, a school counselor for a long time. Now she's retired.
So did your parents split during your childhood?
Yeah, no, they split. Yeah, they split when I was a child. They split.
How old were you when that happened?
I don't remember, maybe 11, 12, somewhere around there. It's kind of, I don't really remember, to be honest with you, like what real age I was. I did a lot of time in institutions since I was about 10 years old. So I spent from about 10 to about 19, pretty much incarcerated in one form or another in psychiatric hospitals, different juvenile type institutions like a boys ranch. It kind of started my institutionalization at a young age. If that kind of, I didn't really have Christmases in the same way and birthdays, in the same way that a lot of people maybe did. So, to this day, I'm not a holiday guy. I mean, I don't care about them, but they really don't do much for me.
Before that ever happened, how would you have described yourself?
Wild. I was pretty out there, starting fires, things like that, fighting with siblings, just, ADHD. And this was back, in the, the early 90s, when I started getting 13. And so, I was born in 77. So I suppose in the mid 80s, I had a hard time. I was a middle child, which I don't know, some people say that's, bad, but, I didn't adjust very well. I think I needed more attention than my mom and family was able to give me. And so I acted out a lot. And, I started stealing mostly, and that was pretty much centered around my whole life, to be honest. Like, the first thing I ever stole was a pack of baseball cards. And I felt so, like, cool. I got away with it. And, the other kids were like, oh, man, yeah, look at that. And then my mind was like, and if I could get a pack, I could get the whole box. And so I tucked my pants into my socks, and I went back in a little store called the Blue Basket. And I grabbed the whole box, just shoved it down my pants, and they're all falling, and I can hear crinkle, crinkle. And I'm like, fuck, this guy's going to hear me. So I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm talking real loud as I back out the door. And I went into this little culvert where all the kids, where we hung out, and I pulled my pant legs up, and it was just like this cascade of like silver, it was the upper deck packs. And everybody was like, whoa, and I was like, don't touch them, they're mine. And then, and to be honest with you, I think what happened is I found acceptance. I was cool. Everybody was like, dang. And so that kind of fueled a lot of my life was, being accepted by committing crime, by doing daring things. And so, I really got into stealing when I was a kid. It was pretty, sometimes my sister had these leggings on, I'd put them under my pants just because I could shove, cartons of cigarettes, down, back when they used to come out of the little thing, you'd pull them and go bing, bing, and in junior high, when I was in between stints of being locked up, I would steal makeup. I'd take notes, and the girls would be like, I need Maybelline number 5, or, and I'd be writing everything down, and I'd go over at lunchtime to, to the Albertsons and just start, shopping. And it just kind of progressed from there. So later on in life, I just started stealing, and I had a neighbor I met, this guy named Buff. Buff was cool, man. I love Buff, man. He passed away. But Buff was a cool dude, and I got close with him. And Buff liked to buy stolen stuff, like whatever, like everything and anything. Wheelbarrows, boxes of styrofoam cups. Buff would buy it all. And so that really fueled. I drive around. I had a '74 Ford Galaxy 500 we called Twisted Metal, and it would just be packed. People in the trunk. It was just this thing. We would drive deep, and I'd smash into those big round dumpsters in the alleys. Sometimes I'd push them out on the main streets and drive off. I did a lot of really dumb stuff. I drove through privacy fences at 2 a.m, bad things that looking back, it's like, wow, reckless.
What was the first incident that got you institutionalized at 10 years old?
There really wasn't a specific incident. It was just kind of like, my mother was having a hard time with me, my behaviors, getting in trouble, acting out in class. And so she drove me to, there's a place we have there. It's called a Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch. They call it Yellowstone Treatment Centers now. And so she drove me out there. She said, we're just going to look at this place. And I remember I got all mad, and I was like, what are you trying to drop me off here? You got my clothes in the trunk? And so they toured the place, and it was really nice. They have horses, and it looked pretty nice. And she's like, look, we could try this out. And so I did. So I ended up staying there for a while. And, and that, like I said, I think that kind of just, you have counselors and psychologists, and they give you IQ tests, and they give you all these different tests all the time, and try to figure these kids out. Sometimes, I think there's probably more harm than good done, but I suppose what do you do sometimes?
Yeah. Do you think those facilities did the opposite of what your parents' intention was for?
Probably so. Probably so. So when I was really young, when I was 3 years old, I took a whole bottle of high blood pressure pills. And so I took these high blood pressure pills thinking they were candy or something. They were my grandpa's. And I actually was dead. My brother found me behind a recliner at my grandpa's in Florida. So my dad brought me to the hospital. He's like, "You're dead. You were just dead." And so they're working on me. He says they're hitting me, with the little, clear. And, I lived. So years later, my mom, like I said, she's into psychology, and I think she has her master's in social working. And so she tried to figure it out. She said, they always asked me if you'd ever had any brain injuries. And I always told them no, but I didn't realize that, when your heart was stopped for so long, that with the loss of oxygen to your brain, there could have been some stuff there. So she beats herself up a lot for it. She's a great mom, but.
Were you envious of other kids that had, say, a normal childhood, got to go to actual public schools or?
Yeah, there was
schools?
probably some of that. I don't really fully remember it, to be honest. My memories, sometimes, you start getting years ago, 48. People always think I'm in my early 30s. I get that a lot. They're like, "No way, you're almost 50. But so I do forget some of that stuff. But I don't really remember being envious, but I'm sure sometimes, I'd see kids that, had like a Christmas or something. And it's part of me has chased that before. I ended up one time when I got out of prison, I got married, and it was like, I just want the White House, the picket fence, the wife, the kids. I want a calm life. I'm tired of this. And, had a great Christmas that Christmas, but.
It was a one and done?
Yeah, it was a one and done.
Did you ever end up back in regular schooling, or were your whole teenage years just
No,
in facilities?
So I ended up in college. I never finished high school. I was actually, I ended up in the state juvenile for breaking. I was in an alternative school, and I broke in at night. I stole the keys out of the desk drawer, and then later on I came back and I broke in, and they had some money. They were going to be taking some kind of trip, and I knew there was money there, and I stole money and some, gaming equipment. And this lady gave me her car. Actually, she said, "Hey, steal this. Take my car and just wreck it so I can get the insurance money." And then she reported it stolen way sooner than she said she was gonna. So the next morning, me and my buddy Doug were sleeping in it, and we're surrounded by cops. And they found all the stuff in there. And then so I went to juvie, and I had some cocaine in my pocket. And so I went to juvie, and then they ended up sending me to the state juvie place, which is called Pine Hills. And I didn't conform very well. My first day there, I had snuck some lighters in, and these guys wanted to use them. And then I told them, "Well, I'm smoking too," and they didn't want me to, so I got in a fight with them. And then they told on me. And then I went to a medium security housing unit the very next day, and got in it with a guy there. And then when they let me out of my cell 24 hours later, I ran up on him and got it again. So they sent me to the maximum security unit, which was called Range Riders. And I got wild. I did a lot, so I got in a lot of fights. If I got in a fight with someone, then they couldn't stay on the unit. I wasn't going to feel like, I had to watch out for them. So they would give you 24 hours, no matter what you did. You could assault a guard, would escape. The maximum you did was 24 hours in your cell. So as soon as the 24 hours was up, I would get out, and I would go right back to whoever I got into it with if they were still in the unit, and I'd just smash them.
Do you think getting that taste of prison at such a young age helped you later on in life when you were in prison, like in the federal prison system?
Yeah, definitely. It gave me a lot of insight into, the behaviors of criminals, and being, manipulation. I'd have to manipulate to get, from a young age, I learned to manipulate the guards and the staff to get what I want, so I became very manipulative, instigating. I instigated stuff, just constantly chaos. I would instigate things, if I didn't like somebody, I'd instigate, find little ways to get someone else to, do something to them. And so it became, I learned from a young age, how to instigate and how to manipulate. And, I got into it with a lot of guards. This is back in the day when there was like mop ringers, so sometimes, there'd be, I was just wild. I'd hit some guards with mop ringers, mop handles, things like that. And it became so much that the state, they decided, I guess, like, we can't handle this dude here anymore. So they sent me to a juvenile facility in Colorado. It was called High Plains Youth Center in Brush, Colorado. I think it's the women's prison, state prison. So it was a prison. This thing was, and that was a real change. They lied. They had a brochure and showed me it had a pool and everything to get me on the plane down there nice and easy. And I got into that place, and the guards from Montana, they took the cuffs off me, and there was, cameras everywhere, and I'm in this little hallway, and it was all these big guys. They're all like ex-football players from college, and they were going to straighten these kids out. And it was a very violent, a very rough place. And so as soon as the guards from Montana left, without warning, just bam, I was up against the wall. The guy elbowed me, had me pinned up there, and he's like, "You're not in Montana anymore, boy, you hear me?" And, so they brought me in the unit. There's 12 kids in each unit, and there's 4 guards that would work for each unit. So, that kind of gives you, they weren't always right in the room, but there's cameras everywhere. There's a walkway that overlooks the day rooms. And it was all kids from around the country. So it was very interesting. It was actually, it was all gang kids. There was Black Pea Stones from Chicago. There was Bloods. There was Crips. There was gang members from Connecticut. I had a buddy named Kenny from Bridgeport. And it was all kids. He killed a couple guys at the courthouse, that killed his homeboy. He shot him. It was just some crazy. I think he was from New Britain. New Britain?
Yeah, New Britain, Connecticut.
New Britain. He was a deuce. And so, here I was, this white boy from Montana, no gang experience, and I'm in this, and with all these gang members. And so, they all taught me all their, gang signs, and, it was pretty, I there was everything you could imagine there. And it was all these were kids that, were pretty ruthless and violent for the most part, and that they had been, sent there from their state. Sometimes we'd be walking in the hallway, 12 kids in each unit. We'd pass another unit. And next thing you know, man, the gang signs would start flying. They'd be like, "Hey, fuck you, whoop, whoop." And then boom, it would just pop off.
So a guy like you who's white and that age, where would you go? Like, who would you
I'd
run
just
with?
step back and watch it, man.
So you weren't involved with any of the gang stuff?
Not with that stuff. There's plenty of fighting. We were pretty rough kids. There was 4 and 6 man cells. So your unit would have 3 4-man cells, and sometimes we'd switch with another one. So we'd be in 2 6-man cells. And I was an A1. It was all president's name, Abraham 1. And it was, they ran like a group on us, and so we'd circle up group. We had to hold each other accountable. So I'd be like, "Hey, do you see your authority problem leaning on the wall?" And if you said no, then I'd say, "Circle up group." And I'd be like, "I'm calling this Ian. He was leaning on the wall. Situation is, I asked him if he saw his authority problem, and he said no." And the guards would start circling around. "So what's the problem, dude? What's going on?" And other people would give you feedback. It was really stupid, to be truthful with you. It was like somebody had this idea, like, this is the group, this is how we're going to run it, and they just went with it. And really, it was just a violent. The guards were just very violent. It was tough love. And it just really instilled more violence, more making it natural.
Where do you think those kids got that from?
And probably their home life and growing up. A lot of them grew up in, where you had to, fight to survive. I didn't, a lot of them, that's probably how they grew up.
Where do you think your life went wrong when you look back on it to end you up in that juvenile detention center?
I don't really think my life went wrong. You know what I mean? I don't think, I think you're always right where you're supposed to be, so I think that my experiences of my life and the things that I've done kind of shaped me into who I am. I'd like to say that I would do some things over differently. There's a lot of things that I did. A lot of people that, were hurt by my actions, but I don't think I'd be who I am today without it all.
What do you think were your issues you were struggling with at the time that got you there?
Um, I just, my whole life I had a criminal mind. So, most people that are in prison, um, they're in there for drugs. A lot of it is drugs. It's drug related. It's doing dumb stuff while they're doing drugs or drinking. It's, selling drugs because they were using drugs and then they want to, a lot of it is a lot of pretty much almost, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's got to be pretty high. Was drug related or alcohol related in some form or fashion. I've never been into drinking. I've never been into drugs. I've never been addicted to drugs. I've done drugs. I can take them or leave them. It was not, but it was crime. Like what drives me, not anymore, but what used to drive me was crime, was getting away with stuff. And I like to plan crime. I like to plan, licks. It was constantly financial, like, oh man. So, I have a couple friends, me and my friend Chris, we used to drive around, all night just scoping, looking at warehouses and businesses and, pawn shops, you name it. And so what happened is my conscious mind was constantly looking for a score, looking for some way to get over. And so my subconscious mind, we can influence our subconscious mind, only through the conscious mind. And so you really have to watch, like there's that saying, when you think something and it becomes, reality because you're influencing your subconscious. And I didn't learn this until years later, actually about 6 years ago, when I really started getting into, my mind, my morals, my values, my conscious thoughts, and trying to be a better person and realizing, hey, this isn't, what I want. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in prison. So, I think that I just allowed myself to constantly think about hitting licks. It became who I was, and everybody around me knew. So people would constantly bring me their ideas for crime.
Do you think that all stemmed from the playing cards?
It was baseball cards, but it may. I don't know. So my mother, I love my dad. My dad's been there for me. All the prison sentences I've ever done. For the most part, as an adult, like my dad's been, my rock. He's been, he's doesn't support things that I've done, but I call pops. Hey dad, I need you to send some money, or can you do this? Can you do that? He'd do it. Call this person. And so my mother recently had told me when she came and picked me up out of state prison, when I got out of state prison, and we were going to drive to Florida. The state prison wouldn't let me out unless I left the state. They basically told me, we'll parole you only if you leave the state. So my mom picked me up and she told me, your dad, it's your dad's fault. She didn't even say it was his fault, but and so she was telling me like, your dad always mentions things, and my dad's not a criminal at all. And so what she told me, so a couple days later, I fly down to Florida and I move in with my father. And I mean, I love him to death, but she's right. So he's constantly says these little things. And I think my mom said he always did it since we were little. So we'll be driving down the street and he'll be like, look at that door open. Someone could break into there. He'd just like throw this little like nonchalant comment out. And then he'd be like, oh man, that's not a smart way. The way they leave that cash register open, someone could reach over there and grab the money. And I really started like, holy crap. I was realizing, I was like, damn, like my dad does mention stuff constantly. And it's not that he's trying to be criminal. He's just super observant. He's very intelligent, and he sees things. And so, he's observant and he comments on them. So, I mean, I'm not blaming my father by any means. But I often wonder if little comments like that in a young, developing mind maybe was like, oh yeah, you could do that. And so, yeah, I think from stealing the baseball cards and finding acceptance though, and financial, because I started selling them, trading them. I had a lot of baseball cards. I mean, I had just untold. My mother was like, where are you getting these from? Like I was hiding the packages, down in the garbage can because, it's 40, 50, 100 and then, I'm trading them for, the little sheets that you put them in, and books. And so I have all these books and just bought, it was getting pretty, it was like a business, so.
How old were you when you finally put juvenile detention behind you?
The state of Montana pulled my contract when I was 19. So I think they finally realized, like, dude, this guy's an adult. We're paying, I think it was like $250,000 a year or something to keep me down here in this place. Like, what are we doing? And so they pulled my contract and they came and told me, they're like, hey, your state pulled your contract. You're going to be leaving. And so they sent me back to Montana. And then I moved in with my mom, and then the state paid for my college. So I started college at Montana State University.
What were you going to college for?
Business. And I was going to major in business and minor in acting. It didn't last long. Actually it was cool. And then one day, all of a sudden, they called me down to the office and they were like, hey, and they had this check for me. It was a student loan check. I was like, what is this for? And the lady says, whatever you want. And I was like, because my college was paid for. I already had allotment for books and everything. I was living off campus. They had made an exception for me to let me live off campus because you're supposed to live on campus like your first year. But they're like, look, this guy's been locked up. Like just, and so I got this check and she's like, there's more coming. And I'm like, what? And I don't remember how much the check was for. It was several $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. And I was like, I'd never had that much money. So I went and cashed it, man. And I was rich. And that's when I went and bought, I went right to the Southside pawn shop and I bought a 74 Ford Galaxy 500 four-door, it was like yellow, green diamond tuck velour interior. And then I went and bought a pound of weed. It was like, my mind was like, well, I get some fucking weed. And I went and got my buddies and like, look what I got. And so I started selling some weed and we started cruising around in the car. And then, we just smoked a lot of weed. And then, I started going back to school and, selling weed to everybody in class, like, hey, and finally just college took a back seat. And, I was just ripping and roaring again.
How long did that last?
College?
Yeah, when you finally left.
I don't remember. Not very long. 3, 4, 5 months at the most.
Oh, that was a short stint.
Yeah, everything was always a short stint in my life. Freedom was a short stint. I would get out of, I'd get out and it would just be poof, a wild ride until I'd get locked back up again. And then it would always be, a chunk of time, some number of years, and then I'd get out and then poof, back again. And so all my friends and family and, community members, they'd see me in the paper or, whatever, and be like, oh, and poof, I'm gone. And then everyone like, Ben's out, and then I kind of had this reputation of, to kind of uphold in a little bit, like, oh. And so, it kind of kept fueling the criminal lifestyle.
What was the first charge you got arrested for as an adult when you left college?
I was, I robbed this drug dealer. And I was driving through Wyoming. I bought a car and I had some money and I had a bunch of weed. And I was driving through Wyoming with some friends. And I got pulled over in Gillette, Wyoming. And I had 3 ounces of weed. And you'd think I was Chapo Guzman, man. I mean, this is, in 1996. And they threw the book at me. And so they ended up giving me 5 years in prison. And so I went to Wyoming State Prison. My first day there, I threw one of those big coffee urns of boiling water on a guy. They were calling, it was in the fish row. And they were calling who wants a job, and I was outside of my cell. Everyone got out for an hour a day and I was out and I told this guy, hey, they're asking if someone wants a job. And this other guy, something Caldwell, he's in another cell. He's like, hey, motherfucker. He's like, I'm up next for that job. And I was like, yeah, I was just telling this guy they were asking about a job, bro. I don't know nothing about that. He's like, fuck you. And I'm like, yeah, well, fuck you. So I slammed his bean chute shut, the little tray hole, because it gets hot in there without that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking cooking that, motherfucker. So I went back down to my cell and I had this really old man as a roommate. I mean, the guy, he had a cigarette. He's like, you smoke? I said, yeah. And he grabbed a paper and threw some tobacco in there, one-handed, like literally rolled this whole cigarette. And he said, I've been smoking since there was nothing but Bull Durham. you know, and anyway, he was cool. So I go and tell him, hey man, this fucking guy's up here. He's like, oh, if you ready to fight? I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. Like, I'm ready. So I got some a sock, and I put a bar of soap in it first, and then I took it out, and I went outside of my cell, and I pulled the plug on. There was a hot water for making soups, you know, one of the big coffee urns. And sure enough, that dude was next to be the orderly, and they popped his cell. So he comes walking down the stairs, and he was a white dude from Utah. And I can't remember what gang he was. He was a Blood or a Crip, or I don't specifically remember. But he started throwing these gang signs at me, you know, and like, this is fucking whatever, whoop, whoop street, you know? And I'm like, well, what's up? So he got to the bottom of the stairs, and I grabbed that coffee urn, and he stepped back, like, and later on I talked to him, he's like, well, I saw it was unplugged. So I was thinking, fuck that, it's not even plugged in. But I had the one that had unplugged it. And I just douched him with it, and then hit him with that soap. I had a bar of soap in my hand, and he's screaming, and we're fighting around on the floor, and the cops come in. He bit my hand. I've got the scars still from that bite. He bit my hand pretty good. And so I'm bleeding. The cops don't know what's going on. And they bring me to medical, and they took some pictures of him with a Polaroid, and they're showing me. He didn't look good. I mean, I remember they was like, set him down. I almost passed out. I was like, it kind of looked like buttery, maybe some pink blood. Like, it's been a long time, but it was a pretty bad looking picture. You know, it got a good couple layers of his skin. And luckily for me, they didn't like that dude. So the sergeant, that dude had been, you know, mouthy. And the sergeant came and told me, look, they actually gave me a charge of mayhem, which is pretty cool because at the time, because in the charges, it was like, for write-ups, it was like murder, attempted murder, escape, mayhem, you know? So I had a list of everything. So like I got pretty close up there to the top at the time, which was, you know, for being in prison is, you know, it's like, you know, status, like, yeah, I got a mayhem, which was like the bodily disfigurement or dismemberment of another human being is what it said. So they wrote me up, but they didn't like that dude. So the sergeant came, he's like, man, fuck that dude. He got what he deserved. He's mouthy. I told him he was going to catch it. So they sent him to the max yard, and they sent me to the hole on the medium yard. So I get down there, and there's a guy in there that I knew from juvie. We escaped together in juvie before, a guy named John Potts, good friend. And so we end up talking and everything. And then I get out. Well, that guy, they sent him at one point over to the medium yard finally. So someone's like, hey, someone wants to talk to you in the music room. I get down to the music room, and here's this dude in there. He's like, what's up, motherfucker? Look what you fucking did to me. I'm like, what's up, dude? So it's on. So we're fighting. He's got a big metal dustpan, like a metal one they used to have in there. They don't have that. And he's swinging at me, and I've got there's a mic, a mic on a stand. I'm trying to get him with that. Well, I end up somehow getting him wrapped up with this mic cord against the wall. And then everyone came in and broke it up. I got a bloody nose. He's over here. I mean, I had him good. It was wrapped. And so that was it. And then I had to get into it with all the music room guys. So they're all coming like, hey, dude, you broke one of our mic cords. Dude, like, that's disrespectful. Like, I didn't even know what was going on. They told me go in the music room. I didn't know it was a fight or nothing. I wasn't trying to. So it was kind of like, so now I had a bunch of dudes that used the music room. They were pretty upset. And I was like, look, man, like, I dug it. I wasn't a big deal. I can't fight everybody, so I ended up paying for a new cord, to calm it all down. And so anyways, yeah, they ended up shipping me. I got some more fights, so they sent me over to the max yard. And, some of this is pretty wild. I got pretty wild.
This episode is sponsored by Blue Chew, the original brand offering chewable tablets for better sex. Fellas, let's talk straight facts. Showing up unprepared in the bedroom is like showing up to a UFC fight wearing Crocs. You might make it through the first round, but it's not going to end well. Blue Chew's tablet changes that. It's like pre-workout for your pelvis, stronger, harder, longer lasting. It's like your manhood just got out of a motivational seminar and won't stop flexing in the mirror. The first time I used it, my confidence stood up before I did. My jeans were tighter than TSA security. I was walking around like I had a secret I couldn't keep. I tried to sit down and the chair filed for workers' comp. True story. But listen, this isn't just about performance. This is about legacy, or what I like to call third leg-a-see. You don't want her texted or group chat, hey, it was fine. You want, girl, I saw the light. Here's the deal. Get your first month of Blue Chew free when you use promo code LOCKEDIN at checkout. Just pay $5 for shipping. That's it. Join Blue Chew's mission to upgrade humanity one thrust at a time. Head to bluechew.com for details and safety info. And as always, big thanks to Blue Chew for sponsoring this episode. Give us a good max security Wyoming prison story.
I mean, it goes on and on.
Give us the best
but,
one.
Well, I don't even.
There's got to be a top one.
I finally tried to light a sex offender. I don't know what there was a sex offender, and this guy, him and his wife had been locking kids up in like dog kennels. And let me just say this. Let me just preface this. One thing I don't do with sex offenders, like, that's my hot button. Don't fuck with kids. Yeah, I mean, that's just always been like, and maybe some of that came from, you know what I mean, me just, growing up as a kid in jails and stuff. But like, it's just one thing. I kind of like my empathy, reasoning is kind of shot a little bit in my head. But when it comes to like kids and vulnerable people, like older people, it's like, that's just, no, and so that's always kind of been my hot button. And so they stuck this sex offender, this guy that had been locking kids up in dog kennels on our yard in my block. It was like almost a setup, it felt like, and it probably was. The guards were probably like, they called me cheesy in Wyoming State Prison because my name was McChesney, and it was, cheesy, and I always had this cheesy smile. I was always happy. People were like, why are you happy? You're doing all this time, all the time. And so the guards probably did. They were probably like, put him over there by cheesy. I don't know. So I went in, and he was an old man, and so it was like, there wasn't much I could do. I wasn't going to go in. So I went and slapped him around a little bit, choked him out, threw him around the cell, and he ended up shutting his door, PCing up, locking it, waiting for the cops. So I threw a whole bunch of rolls of toilet paper under the door. It was a real tall doors there. I threw them all under there, and I lit them on fire, pushed them under the door. So, it got smoky, smoke's going off. The cops come running up. So I go back to my cell, and I start hiding stuff in my Bible. You could take your Bible to the hole. So I'm trying to hide stuff in the Bible. I'm like, they're going to blame me no matter what. And they did. They knew. They came right down. Cheesy, that's it. Cuff up. And I'm like, how you blaming me? I don't fucking know nothing about this shit. And they're like, bullshit. So they took me to the hole. And I never got out again.
Now, they sold matches back then, or lighters, or?
Yeah. We had cigarettes on commissary. Pack of marbles was like $1.65. You could buy the thing of Bugler and whatnot. And so, yeah, they took me to solitary confinement. And man, Ian, I'll be honest with you, bro. It's like you become kind of like an animal in there. So I had two really good friends in the hole there, and one of them, his name was Jimmy Jake Hardy. I don't know if I actually finally, after like 30 years, had just got a hold of him. I found someone that knew him online, and I got a hold of him, talked to him once, but he has like brain cancer and he's on the run, still living a wild life, and then I haven't heard back from him. And then I had another friend named John Potts. And so we would just rock it with the cops constantly. And I would instigate everybody into doing it. I would try to get all the units popping off at the same time. I would try to pop it off only before shift change, because if something happened at 10 o'clock shift change, for instance, I think that was 10 or 11 was their shift change. If something happened before that, all the guards had to stay that were involved in the situation until it was resolved. Well, fuck, extracting all of us out of our cells and fighting with them, that could get to 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And so, I was like, hit him in the pocket, boys. And so we'd block our windows and we would flood and, just everything that we could possibly do. And then it was you could never cuff up. Cause they come and they mace you and they, cuff up. And if you cuff up, then you're a pussy. Like, that was it. Like, cuffing up. And so, I would drain the toilet of the water or the sink. You can blow out the P-trap and put like a garbage bag. You can get all kind of stuff in there. There's the protective custody block. Those guys, clean, and sometimes, so there's all kind of ways, and so I would breathe like out of the toilet. You can breathe out of there, and sometimes they'd be spraying mace in there, and everything's blocked up, mattresses up against the wall, everything's flooded, the water's off, you're tired. I've got saran wrap wrapped around my eyes and wet towels, and you still got mace everywhere, your snot blowing, and you're still, fuck you. I mean, it's just really why it's, you're like an animal. And so I took one time a shower curtain, had it all wrapped around. I had like a peanut butter bottle, like a gas mask, with holes cut in it and a bunch of shit in there. It didn't work, but it was cool looking. I wish I had a picture of it, and I would write stuff. And, I was, at the time it was, it was more racial. So it was like whites, blacks,
Were there gangs or it was just race?
It was mostly race in Wyoming State Prison. It was mostly race. So, things would pop off racially wise. Like this black guy ripped me off for some weed one time. I went and hit him with a shovel on the yard. And so, the white boys were like, you can get a swastika now, because you put in some dirt. It was a pretty wild, deal. Just things like that. This is back, in the 90s. If you had like some political ink on you, like I got, white pride on my arms down there. I had a swastika on my knee. I covered it up. It's never really been me. I've never really been a racial person. I grew up, with kids from, every race, but when it was in there, it was like, it became, a lot of racial tensions. There's not a lot of black people on the Wyoming State Prison yard, but there is. And so, there was a lot of tensions.
And you guys had access to shovels?
Yeah. Actually, yeah. We had a little, there was closets right there for doing yard work, shovels, rakes. Those things have probably changed. While I was there, these three guys, they killed a guard right there, trying to escape, and tried to jump the fence. And then they stole a truck from the guy, but anyway, maintenance worker, and they ran in the fence. Anyways, that's their stories to tell. But, I was in the hole with, those guys later on, and, it's just, you getting this wanting to get out, I mean, God, if I had life, I would never stop trying to get out. Like, like there's no way. Like, I don't blame them. I mean, digging a hole. I mean, because, at that point, what are you going to do? I mean, you got life. This is it. You might as well try to get out. And out of desperation, it's like a rat in a cage, and so you start, you put some fire to that cage, that thing's trying to get out of there. And so it's the same way, and the guard they killed actually was a really good guy, man. He's like, sometimes it's sad because you're like, man, that was the good one. It wasn't that fucking asshole that treats us all like shit. It was this cool guard who just happened to be, in the bubble that day. His name was Martinez. But, and so, yeah, so in the hole, that was it. I was pretty wild. They would move me around. They had an old death row house from before they had death row. So this cell had been sitting empty for years, and it had been built like makeshift. So the hole in the Wyoming State Prison is set up, like this, and it's like a star. So you got all these units, and then in the middle there's a guard booth, and so in between two of the units, in the kind of that general rotunda area, they had built two cells for a death row. And it was old. They hadn't used it for years because now they built a death row. So they put me in there one time. And I tied myself in the cage, and I jammed the locks with pieces of a comb and toothpaste. And I started flooding and throwing all the water onto this. There was this whole wall of electrical boxes for the whole hole on the other side of this, like that diamond expanded metal. And I just started hucking it. And I got a little plate off the wall, and I yelled in there through the conduit, "Hey, it's Cheesy." And they were like, "What up?" I'm like, "When the lights go off, it's on." So I'm thinking this water's going to like short out. Lucky I didn't die. Nothing actually happened. But they came in and started macing me, and they cut the locks off. They couldn't get the cage open because this had a door and it also had a cage. And that's the only time I've been tear gassed. And they tear gassed me with this big black, it looked like a fire extinguisher, said M44 on it. It had like an eagle with the shield. I mean, so they started spraying that in there, and it went in one door. So this cell had two doors on it. It had a bathroom that had like a shower and everything, and then that expanded metal, and then there was a door that went out to the rotunda. And then anyways, so it all started flowing through. So the guards are getting fucking tear gassed. They're out there puking. I'm in here puking. It was the only time I'd ever gave up like that. I'm like, all right. They couldn't get in the cage. Like they're trying to cut it with bolt cutters. They're talking about getting a cutting torch. I'm telling them, yeah, motherfuckers. And you're just wild in there, and I got all this stuff wrapped around me for mace, swastikas on them and just a bunch of shit,
You're a real menace.
I was a menace. So years later, so let me tell you, this one's a really, really, really good one. So they finally, at one point, they moved me up to like the intake unit on a whole nother yard. They had right by the garage, they had a cell, a solitary cell, and had a big wide. So they put me in there because that way I couldn't, you gotta understand, I was instigating so much stuff going on down there. Fires and floods. We would start fires and pull them out with strings into the middle of the hallway. And they didn't have cameras at the time. So they put cameras on tripods at the end of the unit. And so I'd come out there on shower time and I'd hold a towel in front of the camera. And when I'd let it go, there'd be fires behind me. And they'd be like, because they said, we're going to charge you guys with arson. And so now they wouldn't know where it came from. But it wasn't me because I'm right there. And so it was just, constant, fighting with them. So they moved me to this cell, and one day the cop comes by. I said, "Where's my mail?" He's like, "It's over in C unit, which is the hole in Wyoming State Prison." I'm like, "Well, get my mail." He's like, "No, dude." I'm like, "Fuck you, get my fucking mail." So the ceiling had that expanded metal, so I couldn't get to the lights, and the bed was this big medical bed, and you could move it. It wasn't bolted. So I tied it with sheets from the ceiling and used it like a battering ram and just started hitting the door. Boom, boom, boom. And blocked the window. And I'm over there like, you fuck. And so now they're like, oh, fuck, dude, Cheesy's going off again up here now. And now, normally they just come in and mace me and it's just me. They don't have to deal with everyone else. So it'd be a lot easier. But now they've got the SORT team out there and they're all turtle suited up, and they're waiting to get in. And I'm peeking out, you fucking pussies, come and get some. And I'm actually ripping the door. The metal of this door is ripped. And I'm just bam. And they're like, what the fuck? They don't know what's going on, but they can tell. It's like, they don't want to go in there. It's a good thing they didn't. Because he probably would have got some broke ribs. And so they broke my ribs before. So this sergeant came in from home. It's like 3 a.m. And he's like, Cheesy, come over here and talk to me, Brad. I'm like, you're going to try to come in the door? The bean chute was on the wall. I'm like, dude, he's like, you have my word, bro. I'm like, all right, we're on a truce right now, man. You're like, you ain't going to try to come in the cell while I'm talking to you. And this was one of those ones you could trust. Like, yeah, I could have been talking to him. They could have hurried up and ran in and got me. But, he would lose his credibility. And so he's like, what's going on? And I explained to him what was going on. And he was like, you guys got me here for fucking mail. Get him his goddamn mail now. So he's like, look, we're going to get your mail. And I'm like, well, now I haven't had dinner. He's like, it's almost breakfast. And he's like, look at yourself. And I remember he told me, look, and I looked in and I had all this ink that was like dripped on my face from all the headbands and, towels that I had wrapped around for the mace. And I just was tired, man. It was late. But he's like, I'm going to get your mail. And he said, we're going to get you some food. We're going to get you cleaned up, new mattress and blankets. And so I let him in. I was like, yeah, cool, man. They didn't even cuff me up. Normally they'd cuff you up. He's like, I'm going to open the door. You cool? I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. He opened the door. I came out. And so the SORT team, these guys are out. They've been in here for hours in these suits just sweating. And I can see it, man. Like they were deprived of their prize. You know what I mean? Like their prize was like, oh, we're going to fuck this dude up when we get him. And they couldn't that time. So another time I got into a fight with a guard over a roll of toilet paper and we got into a physical fight and I'd grabbed his radio and was like, kick it off. And they beat me up and then and they put me in they actually had me so bad. I definitely thought I was going to die. And everybody else told me later on, Cheesy, we thought they were killing you in there. And I'm like, they were. They had me in this solitary cell and just stomping me, jumping on me, broke my ribs. They grabbed my finger and snapped it. It was just brutal.
When you're doing this, do you feel mentally sane in the moment? Like, what's going through your mind?
I don't know. Yeah, I know. I guess probably a mental person doesn't know if they're mental, I suppose. They probably think they're sane. It's reality to them at the time. So, for me, there's a lot of calculation. I'm fairly intelligent. I'm just, I could calculate it all. So no, I don't think I really feel insane. It's more just like, kind of like an animal, like, yeah, come on and get me then, fuck you guys. There were guards that would come and tell me like, hey man, tonight would be a good night for overtime. And then there's other times they would come and be like, hey, Cheesy, man, I got to get up in the morning, bro. Don't do nothing tonight. And I would use that to my advantage. I'd be like, well, fucking turns out how dinner is, man. Like, you know what I mean? We got chicken tonight, bro. How many trays am I getting? Like, listen, man, just make sure everything's cool tonight. So it got to where it gave me, I think, some form of power in a place where you really don't have very much power. So I think maybe it was more of a trying to get the upper hand and try to feel like, hey, I have some influence in what's going on.
Do you regret the way you treated correctional officers?
No. I'm going to be honest with you. Most correctional officers, in my opinion, are fucking scum. I've been in 14 federal prisons. I've been in state prison in Montana. I've been in state prison in Wyoming. I've been in county jails all across the country. I've been in several immigration prisons in Mexico City. I've been transferred on 23 different times, U.S. Marshal JPATS flights. That's the Con Air. It's Justice Prisoner Air Transport. I've been bussed around the country. I've been in, county jails. I mean, I've got a map, of the United States and everywhere I've been at. Did you see the map?
Yeah, I saw it.
Isn't
that what you first messaged us with?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're like, you want to come on the show? Most people that you're going to meet, just to be honest, that have been in that many institutions, like for real, you're probably not going to meet them because they're probably doing life. They're probably, incarcerated forever, but I've met a lot of really good correctional officers. It's not, exclusive to, correctional officers or shit. My take on law enforcement is a little bit like we need law enforcement. I'm a citizen. I don't do shit. I'm telling you what, I don't spit on the sidewalk, dude. It's not because I'm scared. It's just because, I want to be a good person in my society. I've changed my mind frame. I've changed my life. I have, a 3-year-old that, I didn't adopt her. I'm the custodian of her, since she's been a year old right when I got out of prison. And then I have a 25-year-old stepdaughter that lives with me. I love to help people get out of prison. Like I said, I wrote a correspondence course, recidivism reduction correspondence course. I've got a book that I've been working on. It's pretty much done, about recidivism. And when it comes to, correction officers and law enforcement, there's always some good ones and there's some that, take advantage of their power. And, the good ones really don't say shit to the bad ones. And that's really where it comes. I mean, you watch video after video, we all see them in our feeds, some guy getting beat up by the cops, and some of them are warranted. And I'm like, you got what you got coming, dude. Like, that's great. That's funny. Some of them you're like, damn, that cop is very, heavy-handed. Like, he is forcing this situation, to go there. He's not de-escalating. And the other cops are all standing around. I mean, let's be real. They're not. And so, okay. And so it basically comes to like, and it's the same thing in corrections. If there's a cop and he's in the wrong, those other guards, they're not standing up for nothing, dude. They're not going to be like, hey, hold up, man. Hey, Bob, let me talk to you. And then the other ones step in and take over and de-escalate the situation. They're like, we're backing him up. No matter what happens, later on, we'll deal with it. Well, they're not dealing with it very good later on because if it continues to happen. And so I think what happens is, you're so dehumanized in prison by a lot of the officers that the ones who are more human and decent, they don't say anything. They don't really stand up. It's very, very, very rare. I've seen it in some extremely rare situations where you'll have one who's like, hey, dude, no, this ain't going down like this. You're not going to treat that inmate like that. And so I think that, I don't mind, when I went to prison for the things that I did, I've been to prison for some things I didn't. But like, yeah, I'm a big boy, man. I stole, I broke into a semi truck, and stole 2 pallets of firearms. Like, I'm an adult. Like, I did that. And I knew when I stood there and saw that they were guns as an adult, like, man, this is the ATF, Ben. Like, this ain't, some TVs. You're going to get a slap on the wrist. You take these, you're playing with the feds. And so as an adult, I made the decision and I took them. So doing the time is easy. Like, they say, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. It was like, cool. So
So you're in your 20s, you get out of state prison in Wyoming. What happens next?
So I actually beat my case in Wyoming. I fought for the whole time. I was in there for 3 years, 9 months on a 5-year sentence, and I had lost all parole privileges. But let me tell you, so they put me in a cell. Actually, though, it's kind of interesting. They locked me up. They cut my clothes off with a scissors and had me in handcuffs and belly chains. And they put me in a juvenile cell they had built for juveniles. And I just sit there, and it was up by a cage. It wasn't in the housing units, and it was up like by the counselor's offices and stuff. And finally, after a week, 10 days, the warden and everybody comes in. And he says, "You gonna hit me with that chain if I come in there?" I said, "No." He said, "Why don't you have a seat?" He says, "Look, dude, just like this, what do we got to do to stop all of this? The fires, the floods, the overtime." He says, what do we need to do?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to ask you to put me back on the yard. Because first off, that would be weird. Everybody on the yard, on the max yard in Wyoming State Penitentiary knew, like, Cheesy's back there cutting up because they're getting locked down sometimes when they have to pull staff. And so they'd be like, "How did they let you out?" It would just look bad. They'd be like, "It doesn't even make sense." It's hard to comprehend some of this stuff because, most people have never lived in this. And so I said, "Tell you what, give me, Jeep, and Potts our TVs, PlayStations, and leave us alone, dude." And he said, "Done. What else?" I said, "Just don't fuck with me, bro." I said, "But I get my PlayStation too, right? Because they have an honor unit in the hole. If like your time is done, but they don't want to send you to the yard yet because, you're like a risk, not the PC rat unit. That's different. But they have one, it's like a step down. It's like, okay, you don't have any more time. You're not on discipliner anymore, but you're on administrative detention until we're ready to put you to the yard." And those guys could have just their TVs. And so he cleared 3 dudes, sent them to the yard, and put us down in there, and didn't have no more problems. One time a guard came down giving me shit, and I never saw him again. I was like, "That fucking motherfucker, you guys, we got an agreement. The agreement's over. You let the warden know it's over." I used to manipulate. I'm like, and they're like, whoa, he's new, look. And then they moved. I mean, it was pretty. And so anyway, long story short, one day they called me up and they said, "Your counselor needs to see you." And I went up there, and I called this like legal assistant that was helping me with my appeal. And she's like, "You beat your case. You're going home. You won. Complete reversal." And so now I'm in my counselor's office. I'm like, "I was innocent the whole time." And these guards are coming around. They're like, "They're letting this guy out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to move right here to Rawlins. I can have guns now." And they're just like, because I was pretty, if you looked at it from that point of view, you're like, wow. And so that, I didn't move to Rawlins and I got out. And so I ended up calling. They wouldn't let me. I tried to mail some money and I tried to write my friends back in there and they were denying them. And I called and talked to the warden, and the warden's name was Vance Everett. Hopefully someone knows him and they can send him this and tell him to get a hold of me. Because I've actually looked him up. He was a good guy, And he told me, he says, "You're the worst prison I've ever seen in my life." He says, "You still owe me a door, by the way," that door with the bed incident. And I told him, "Yeah." He says, "Man," he's like, "I hope you're doing good, man, and you be good out there," And we had a good conversation, but he was like, "I never had nothing like you," And so I tried looking him up. I couldn't find him though anywhere. But anyways, so yeah, I got out. So after getting out from that, let's be real, I got out and I was fucking wild, man, Ian. I mean,
At least you're honest.
I was wild. Definitely probably not somebody in a frame of mind that should have been in society. My brother picked me up from up in Gillette, Wyoming. They brought me up there, and my brother picked me up, and he was living in a little house, and all his friends. This is November 3rd, 1999. And, this is meth was a big thing then. So he's got a house and he has all biker friends and saw bikers and meth going on. And, it's a pretty, I was right into some, and everyone's like, "Ah, you got out." And, everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to get millions, you were in prison." And so I used that, I did have a lawsuit. Girls are like, "Oh man, you're going to be rich." I'm like, "Yeah," they said a couple million, So, it was good times and I was just so wild. And so I didn't have any money. And I tell people, "Who owes you money? Let's go get it." And they were like, "Fuck, cool, man." And so, you know, I'd roll over and just, you know, get their money or whatever I could. I mean, you know, they'd bring me to doors. I'd knock on doors. Did you want this fucking guy money? You know, anyways, and you know, just, and that, and a lot of times these guys would just let me keep it all. They just were happy someone got the guy that ripped them off, you know, and so they'd be like, dude, you keep it all. And then that kind of evolved into drug dealers. And, you know, I'd never really been into selling drugs. There's been some times in my life, but, and it just kind of evolved into, you know, finding people, and people would come to me and tell me things, you know, hey, this dude's over here. He's got a bunch of shit he's selling, you know, and I'd be like, oh yeah. And so, you know, it's a small town, you know, this isn't, you know, New York City where you've got some mafia boss, you just robbed his stash house and they're going to kill you. You know, so some of it's probably hard to believe from someone who's living in, you know, a certain parts of, you know, the country, and they're like, you wouldn't steal from us, you know, whatever.
Was the next case the federal case?
The next case was, yeah, so I got arrested. I got on probation for some burglaries. And me and my buddy Rolo, and so I ended up getting probation. And I was like, look, I had a daughter, I stayed out of trouble. I was on probation for several years, and no problems, you know, no dirty UAs. And one day, my probation officer called me. I was selling cell phones for a company called Airtel. Anyways, it was like the Nextel phones. We didn't have them. I was a top salesman. Nobody beat me. I was making money legitimately, you know, doing very well financially. And my PO called me up, says, hey, come on in. And I came in, and they brought me to a conference room, and it was a bunch of cops, the drug task force. And I was like, what's up? And they were like, have a seat. And I was like, I think I'll stand. And they told me, you know, hey, do you know this guy, David Spencer? They call him Spicoli. I'm like, yeah, I know who that dude is. What do you know about him? I said, he's selling drugs. He got caught, started ratting on people. Like, you know what I mean? That dude was just some rat. You know what I mean? Some dumbass drug dealer. And they were like, what about you? And I said, I never got drugs from that dude. They're like, what about your brother? I told them, I don't know, ask my brother. You know, and they were like, well, we're asking you. I said, well, look, man, I'm not a cop. I didn't sign up to be a cop. That's your job. I have a job and I do mine. You do your job. This is almost word for word. I mean, how this conversation went. And there was an FBI agent right there. It was Matt. I know his full name. I never forget him in my life. And he looked at me and he says, you know, we can indict you too. And I said, for what? And he says to me, whatever the fuck we want. And I left. And my PO, she was in there. And I go to her office with her, and she's like, I'm like, fuck, what the fuck? I have nothing to do with this. I don't fuck with none of this meth shit. And she's like, you'll be all right. Just don't worry about it. I'm like, no, you hear that? And so a few months later, all these indictments came down, and they indicted me with my brother and all his friends. I didn't know none of these people. I mean, and so the judge let me out until trial. He also let my brother out. Said, no, you know, I was doing good. So, you know, these lawyers, man, they don't fight for you. They don't want to do nothing, dude. They get that CJA money, that Criminal Justice Act money, and they're not going to go to trial and risk not getting any more cases. You know, what I have to say about that is extensive, but, you know, the federal defender system in this country is a joke. You know, they whack up the extra money at the end of the quarter that they've got left over as bonuses. I mean, it's all permitted. They got to, you know, and so the more someone's going to trial, you know, they're going to get X'd out. They're like, hey, Bob, what are you doing? You cost us all our bonus. I mean, it's a joke. It's not cool. And so none of the lawyers, they gave me private lawyers, you know, and I finally fired a few, and the judge said, go find a lawyer, you pick them, and you let us know. So they gave me the sheet of all the criminal justice, you know, contract lawyers. And I found this guy named Mark Arabeau. And he's like, yeah, I'll fight the case. I'll take the case, man. And so I told him we're going to trial. And of course, trial day's coming. And he's like, you sure? Because everybody says they're going to trial. And these lawyers are like, yeah, they all say that. So I'm like, oh no. So I go to trial. I think 5 of us went to trial. And I've got to sit with all these guys I've never met. And and so it's a conspiracy. You know, big drug conspiracy, 83 pounds of meth, several $1 million laundered, you know. And my brother's there as his lawyer and all these other guys. And, so they get all these guys up on the stand to tell, and there really was no evidence against me. I didn't do anything. They got a couple people to lie up there. One guy, a good friend of mine, he was a really solid dude, I thought, like the most solid dudes you can imagine, and this guy actually was in federal prison and wrote them and was like, I'll tell, and so Lonnie Vandersloot, they bring him back up, and he gets on the stand, and boy, Ian, this jury just ate it up. He sat up there and he was like, I'm with the Lord. And I prayed to God in my church group about what was right, and then this dude just lied his ass off, said that he had bought drugs from me. I mean, the prices didn't even make sense. They were actually cheaper than the price that the head guy said he was selling them to. So how am I getting them? And then I got them from my brother. I mean, none of it added up, and says I was selling him, this drugs for so cheap, but he only did it once or twice. Like, if I'm giving them to you cheap, why would you not keep coming to me? And it was the same drugs. That way it was part of the, it was just a joke. And so the jury came back and convicted me. I thought, there's no way. Dropped my kids off at the babysitter and went in for the verdict. I'm like, yeah, clearly I'm innocent. The prosecutor offered me probation to plead guilty during trial and said he would give me just marijuana charges and give me probation. And I told him, no deal. And the jury whacked me and found me guilty. They found me not guilty of the counts that I was charged with, but guilty of another count that I wasn't even named in. And so no one knew what to do. And the judge was like, well, they found you guilty, so who cares? And so, off I went. And so at sentencing, I gave it to him. I speak my mind. I'm not one of those guys who's like, Your Honor, I'm sorry. So my brother went in and was like, Your Honor, I'm sorry. I sold drugs and I love my brother, but he told him, I'm sorry, and I want to get out. And then in the newspaper article, it says his brother Ben was a different story. I take no acceptance for responsibility whatsoever, Ben McChesney told the judge. And then I just went on and said, this is all a farce, the whole drug, thing. They go after the little guys. They don't go after the big guys. They're easy and they're, easy pickings. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. And the judge wasn't happy. And he was like, at the end, he says, you're blaming everybody but you. And he says, I think a sentence at the high end of the guidelines. And I had told him, if this gets me the max, Your Honor, I stand by what I didn't care, dude. I got it. And I said, the marshals were part of it. The lawyers, I said, you guys are all part of this. And, I was mad. I didn't have nothing to do with it. I'm losing my wife and my kids and, my freedom. And that's what I told him, a father's being taken away from the ability to protect his children. Your Honor, this is not, you're not doing any good here. I didn't do anything with these drugs. I never did meth. And so, I went 188 months. So what happened is they felt bad, and so they found where the judge made a mistake. And there was, the guidelines, how there was all these points. So if the judge gave me, before I made my sentence, he gave me a minimal role in a conspiracy, which is a 4-point reduction in the matrix of sentencing. So it turns out, if you give a 4-level reduction for minimal role, it says your base offense level can't be higher than a level 30. Mumble jumbo, you probably understand it a lot better than most. And so the judge pulled us back, and he has 10 days to fix a mistake in sentencing. Anyway, so he pulled us back and he said, look, I don't agree with it, but I have to drop you to a level 30 and then give you 4 points off. And so he did that, and he had to give me the maximum sentence of 10 years. And so I went to prison, and I fought it for 10 years. The U.S. Marshals actually told me in the van that the head witness had told them that he lied on me. And my lawyer, that Mark Arabo, wouldn't do nothing about it. And he didn't go bring it to the judge or anything. So when I finally beat it after 6 years, I went back. I was my own attorney. They actually flew me in a nice little Learjet from USP Victorville back to Billings. And everyone's like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going back to court. And usually when people hear that, they're like, I'm like, oh no, everyone's got my paperwork, because everyone knew in my unit what was going on. I have all my paperwork, I have boxes and boxes of paperwork. So, when you hear someone especially at a USP and they're like, I'm going back to court, your mind automatically says, what's going on? Because most of them are going back to court to tell or testify on somebody or something. So anyway, I flew back. They flew me back, on a little private jet. And because I had to get there for the hearing, and I wouldn't allow them to appoint a lawyer. The judge said, look, can you have a lawyer for the hearing? I said, no, we're not doing that. And thank God, too, really decent human beings, the U.S. Marshals, they came forward and they made me statements after, a lot of years. And they said, yeah, this guy during a prisoner transport told us that, Ben McChesney wasn't involved. And, we told him about it. No, his lawyer never contacted us. They were like, he was real blasé. He said one time, mentioned it to us, but and yeah. And so the judge, I did my hearing. I put the prosecutor, and this is the head assistant U.S. attorney. I subpoenaed him to the stand, and he didn't like that at all. I subpoenaed him, and I subpoenaed the Spicoli, they call him from that movie back in the day, Spicoli. They pulled him on. I pulled him on the stand, and I put my lawyer on the stand, and I questioned him, right there in handcuffs. The judge wouldn't take me out of my cuffs. I said, Your Honor, can I have? He's like, no. So I was real loud with him and set him up on the podium. And you could see him thinking like, oh, my nice podium. I should have took. And so I just, I questioned the U.S. attorney, how many times you put someone on a stand in trial and you know that they're not telling the truth, all kind of really good questions. And he's like, well. And I'd be like, Your Honor, would you please instruct the witness to answer the question? And, they're friends, basically. The federal judge, he'd look over, like, Mr. Sikora, answer the question. And this just it was a joke almost the way this guy, and it went back and forth. And so then I put the rat on the stand and my lawyer and said, hey, did you, and at the end, the judge said, you did a great job representing yourself, And I'm thinking, well, fuck, let me out. I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to win, right? Like, that's not happening. So I go back to the county jail and I'm waiting, and then the federal flight comes and goes. And I'm like, why wasn't I on it? Because I want to hurry up and get back, to, USP Victor, but, I'm in county jail. People are a little more disrespectful, and I'm in this kind of mind frame of, USP. And so, things are happening in there, and, I'm getting in some fights, and I was pretty wild, and I wasn't putting up with any disrespect. And people in county jail are more likely, they don't really, you're at a different time when you're on a, like a USP yard. Your mind frame is all about respect and, making sure I don't die or have to, do something to someone else and give more time.
Were you in a USP the whole entire federal sentence before you beat the case?
No, I worked my way up to a USP, truthfully. So, Ian, I actually worked my way down to a camp, which is pretty impressive, really, to be honest with you. And then I worked my way up to a USP.
What did you start at, LO?
I started at FCI Florence, Colorado, medium. And
why'd they start you at a medium? Because technically you didn't have any criminal history.
Yeah, I was on probation at the time, though. So that gave me some points. And, they have a whole scheme of custody points that they do. They changed it a few years back, quite a few years back. They used to have a different scheme, and they changed the system. But so they started me. Now, I was supposed to have like 4 points taken off because I was out until trial. And so custody points, they had this thing, and they wouldn't give me that. So they started me out at Florence. And I said, hey, man, I'm supposed to be in a camp. And they're like, no, dude, it ain't working like that. I'm like, no, I was out to a trial. I didn't have no violations. I went to court, myself. They cuffed me up. I'm like, I get these points. And so my counselor said, look, give me about a year and a half, and I'll put you into a low, and you can argue it when you get there. And so I did that. And he sent me to a low, and I went to Sandstone, Minnesota. And I got to Sandstone, and I manipulated my way. In Sandstone, it's all dorms, but there's an honor unit with cells, F unit. You've got to be there years on the list, and you have to have clear conduct. It's hard to get an F unit. I manipulated my way into F unit within about a month, and it caused a lot of problems in there, controversy, because I couldn't sleep in the dorm, and I was having all these issues like, hey, motherfuckers, you got to be asleep. And I'm going and telling dudes, hey, you guys mind? Like, we're all sleeping. You guys are over here being loud, and I'm putting boots on, and I mean, I'm not Billy Badass by any means. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, but it's like, gotta sleep. So I got into it with some gang members of another race, and I'm like, anyways, I'm backed up in the corner, and I got a big rod sharpened down. I'm like, well, what's up? And then their leader came and was like, stopped it. What are you guys doing? And so I told the psychologist, I'm like, I don't know. I just want to go back to the medium. I can't deal with this. It's fucking someone's going to die. I'm going to die. They're going to die. I don't know. I just don't know what to do, And she's like, what if I could get you into a like a cell. I'm like, what? Which, that was my whole point in the very beginning, going over there. I planned all this out, and it worked. I couldn't believe it. And that day, 2 guys got caught making wine in the unit over there, so cells never come open. And it was just crazy. All of a sudden, they're like, McChesney, roll it up. And I'm like, yeah, and they come like, you're going over F unit. And so I'm over there packing my stuff. People are like, where are you going, dude? Hey, Montana. Everyone called me Montana in there. Where are you going? I'm like, it's over here on the F unit. What? F unit? And then everybody started getting mad, and it became, everything's racial. It became a big racial thing. There wasn't a lot of black people over there. I don't think at the time there was any in that unit. And so it became, because I'm white, you know what I mean? I'm getting to go to F unit, and these dudes been on the list for years, and they've been waiting, and it was this big, I'm just packing my stuff. I'm like, I don't know about none of that. And I'm gone. And so I went over to F unit. And so I started filing grievances, right? I'm pretty good at it. And the key with filing grievances in the federal prison system is you've got to see it all the way through. So you've got to file an informal with your counselor, then you got to file the BP9 with the warden, and then when he denies it, you've got to go to the regional, and then you've got to file to DC. And then after that, you can file in court. And it's a process that takes about 6 months, and there's all these pitfalls. If you don't do it just right, it gets denied, you got to start over, and then people give up. And it's designed for that. But if you can learn how to do it perfectly, then you're golden. And then it's like, okay, this guy's putting his paperwork the right way. And so I started filing. And one day I went to the warden at Mainline. I'd tell him, oh, you guys been violating policies. I'm like an inspector. Like I would carry my file folder, and he'd be like, go get something to eat. I'd be like, I'll wait here. I'm like, no, you did that last time, warden. You did that last time. His name was Warden Cross. I'd say, you told me that, and then you slipped out, man. I'll eat another time. But look, so I'm printing out, policies that cards are violating and things. And I'm like, look, this is all wrong. And so one day I went up to him. They had taken smoking out of the feds, but the guards were still smoking in a little smoke shack. Well, they had an appeal. They were saying it was a change of working conditions, so we're allowed to smoke until our appeal is finalized. So I went to the warden and I told him, so look, here's the next one. It's a big one, warden. I'm like, so your guards are smoking in violation of the Clean Air Act? I'm like, I know that they have an appeal. I said, but the actual intent of Congress was to change the working conditions of all federal employees. So their appeal, we both know, is going nowhere. I'm like, I'm just saying. And so in the meantime, they really are violating the law. And I understand that the guard union has an appeal. And so and he says to me, what is it you want? And it's all I've been waiting for. I closed my book. I said, I just want to go to the camp. I'm supposed to have camp points, and they won't change them. He said, hold on to that. And that afternoon, my counselor came to me and was like, McChesney. I said, yeah. He says, I don't know what you fucking did, because we'd already got into it. And he says, but you're going to the camp. And you don't get to pick which one. You're going to Duluth. I was like, cool. So they transferred me to the camp. I get to the camp. My first day, I met a guy named Shannon Power. He's a pretty cool dude. He's a good dude. I'm in contact with him to this day. I'm in contact pretty much with, a lot of the people that I did time with, all over the country. I've got my little black book. I've never been a rat. I've never been run off a yard. I've never had any of the bad things put on my name. So, I have a lot of friends from all over the country that have, I've done time with from everywhere. And so anyway, Shannon Power, I met him, and, he was doing moves, man. He was a wealthy guy in there, and, we all had cell phones, and he would structure, stuff. He's out now. He's not on paper, nothing anymore. He's all the way out, and he would structure, things. And so he would get duffel bags full of stuff, mailed to someone's relative who was getting a visit. And I would jump the fence and get the duffel bag and bring it back. And and it was a lot actually there. There was a big fence there actually. So to get the bags in, some people would just have their family drive by and like throw it over the fence by the yard where you walk. I would actually had to go under cameras, around cameras. All the way to the back at night where you're not even supposed to be through. It's an old Air Force base. So past all these buildings, and then I would jump the fence and wait by the road. And then it was struggle sometimes, these big duffel bags. And then I'd bring them up, and I had a key to a bus that was, I was in the machine shop. So I was a machinist apprentice, and that's where I worked. So we had old buses back there, and there's old equipment and stuff. It's a camp. And so I would open up under the bus, and I'd put the duffel bags there until the next day. The next day, I'd check out the truck, and I'd go over there, and I'd have pillowcases inside of laundry bags so you can't see, and I'd load everything in there, cartons and cartons of cigarettes and cell phones and pornography DVDs and DVD players and, lobster tails a couple times. I mean, just, and load it in there, and then I'd bring it back to the unit and we'd stash it. And we had some pretty good spots. He had so much stuff that he would have to number the bags, like number 14, and keep a list. Like bag number 14 has, 6 cartons of Newports in it. You know what I mean? All this in it. Bag number 12. So we actually had this spot where you opened it and there was all these pipes. Well, the pipes had been cut and soldered new little pieces so you could lift it up and open it almost like a cage. So when the guards looked in this pipe chase, it's all these pipes. They didn't realize you could lift them up and move them, and a small guy could get up there in the ceiling. And it was a good spot. And there was another spot, that we had, but that was just in one of the units.
Did you ever think about escaping?
They closed that. I think they're closed. Duluth is closed now.
I don't know if I know.
Supposed to have been closed, I think.
Did you ever think about escaping?
No. I did go to the hotel once with a girl. That was pretty wild,
And would you have someone at the camp doing the lookout?
Oh yeah, right. Because I tell you what, you jump and you don't get back, and they do a count or anything. You're done.
How did you meet the girl?
It was a friend of mine from Billings. They drove there. She drove there, and I had him go get cell phones. A lot of stuff. You can only buy like 3 cell phones at a time back then because of like terrorist reasons, and so they had to go to like all these stores all over on the way here just to get enough phones. I had like 50, 60 phones in a bag. The funny thing is, so I had these sweatpants and I had sewed pockets down them. So I was thinking I'm going to fill them up and just come back in with them. So I get to the hotel and I got all these cell phones in these sweatpants, and it's just, it's dragging me down. I'm like, I can't wear these. And another thing is, so all these cell phones, they come in these packages, right? Well, they're hard to get into. Well, there's no knife. She didn't have a knife or anything. So I'm in this hotel room, and I promised everyone I'm bringing them back, Burger King, some guys that are watching for me. And all I had is she had a little pair of scissors for cutting eyelashes. And so I'm like digging it into the packages and I'm ripping them open and I'm pulling the chargers out. Most of them I'm not bringing because we have a lot of charge. And I'm pulling the phone and the SIM cards. And it was just, and it's like cutting them, and I'm trying to hurry because, we got count time coming in, and, the longer you're out there, the more risks that something happens, and I got to go. And so finally I did have a bag too, a laundry bag. So I throw it in there. So she pulls back up by the back. I jump out of her car and tell her, go, go. So they don't see a car stopping on the cameras. There's a blind spot. But, if they see a car go past and it doesn't come back out the other side, at some point, they're going to wander around the corner. And I jumped out. My coat sleeve got caught in the door. So she drove off, and I'm like, so she drove off dragging my coat, and I chipped over the fence and I get all the way back safe, man. And, there was a few times too, one time the cops were chasing me through the place. They didn't know who I was, but they knew they had someone that got something over the fence. And so I've got this, and I didn't have all the stuff, but I had like a small duffel bag of like the really important stuff that we had got that time. So like some cell phones and some porno mags and DVDs. And so I'm running, man, and I'm going in a unit. I go out a window. I mean, it was just pretty, anyways, they're trying to catch you there, and there's a lot of that stuff's happening, but, anyways, I finally so I got kicked out of there for fighting. That's pretty much everything.
And who did you fight with at the camp? No one fights
I wasn't
at a camp.
trying to. Oh, there was sometime. One time I was actually in chow hall and I was telling a story, and I've done a lot of stuff, I don't exaggerate it. To the average person, it's probably like, oh, this is all exaggerated. Nah, well, fuck, whatever. You know what I mean? I don't blame you. You lived, a very protected life. So I was telling a story, and this guy's like, oh, yeah, right. Ah, yeah. One time, the cops had raided me, and they couldn't get in, and I had a pound of weed, and I was flushing it, and it was a brick, so I'm beating it. Anyways, it was it was not a big deal. It was actually, a real story, and this guy's just overhearing it in chow line. And he starts, and it's cool if he doesn't believe it, I don't mind, but he starts, in my face, getting disrespectful, like telling these guys, one time I had 10 keys of coke and making fun of me. And so, I turned around and said, hey, dude, and I beat the fuck out of him right there in line. I'm just being honest with you. Like, that was it. And that's not something that happens, in the camp. Matter of fact, like my second day there, the cops raided our room and got some shit. One of the things I got was some porno mags I bought. As soon as I got there, I'm like, I can get pornography here. It's a big deal. I'm like, pfft. So I bought, and so they raided, and this guy's like, none of this happened until you got here. And basically calling me a rat. I don't know. So I took off on him right then and there. Whop, whop. And later, everyone's like, dude, you shouldn't have done that. I'm like, why? He didn't say anything. I'm like, he was calling me a rat. And they're like, well, he didn't actually call you a rat, And I'm like, no, man, the dude said none of this happened until I got here. So the guards came in, and raided. So if that never happened until I got here, he's saying that I caused that somehow. I don't fucking, anyways. And so, whatever. And so this last time though, so what happened is I lost my job in the machine shop, and which sucks. We cooked out there mostly. Like we got like 50-pound bags of potatoes stolen from the kitchen. We'd get everything right back there and just cook constantly. And so I got fired off that job, and I needed another job that I could move around. So I talked to this boss of, cause they started making it 10-minute moves. You used to be able to go everywhere, and they started saying you can only move every 10 minutes on the top of the hour from 1 to 1:10. You could go make moves, and from then you couldn't really move around. But if you were a guard worker, a yard worker, you could move. So I went and told this inmate, I said, hey bro, and the clerk, I said, hey, I talked to your boss, man. He said, come let you know to put me on put me on. And the dude was like, that's my job. You don't just, I'm like, well, I don't know, bro. I went to the guard and asked him, and he said, yeah, and this dude felt like offended, you know what I mean? That like, I didn't come to him, and so I was like, well, look, bro. And then he just started, getting real disrespectful. And, so, that was it. I snatched him up. He wasn't a very big guy, you know what I mean? But I mean, fuck, I don't care, dude. Like, it was, he was like, and I suppose for a camp, that's acceptable to talk to somebody that way, but I've just never really been that way. And so I snatched him up and just, it was pretty, and he broke his arm somehow. He hit a chair. And so the cops come running in, and I'm like, all these chairs are everywhere. He's breathing heavy, it's clear. So I'm like, I'm very fast. I'm very fast. When the cops come, it's immediate that I'm like, I would just play it, man. Hey, man, CEO, we're just having a good time in here. I mean, it don't matter, bro. I could be bloody, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, we're just playing. I'm always trying to not get caught. And he's like, no, we ain't playing, motherfucker. So they fucking put us in the hole. And then they're like, look, dude, you broke this dude's arm. And then so we both got shipped out. And there's only 2 cells in the camp right there. He's in the cell next to me. I'm like, you fucking worm, dude. Like, well, you started all this. Like, I didn't start it. I don't start anything. I've never started anything, So anyways, and so I left the camp, and they sent me to Oakdale, Louisiana, a low. And there's child molesters on the yard there. The camp, there's no sex offenders. They can't go to a camp. And when I went through Sandstone was a low, but at the time when I went through Sandstone, there was like no sex offenders on the yard, at least not white sex offenders. I mean, how it is. Like, I can't get in other people's business. You don't really, you don't have a say so no matter what in this other racial groups, who they let there. But there was like one guy that was like, had a 16-year-old girlfriend, and he was like half retarded. You know what I mean? He wasn't, no offense, he was like a little bit mentally ill. But anyways, so I don't do well around any sex offenders. Like, I can't live on a sex offender yard. So I got to Oakdale, Louisiana, and there were sex offenders. So I just started doing things to them, slapping them around. Like, I was like, I'm not staying here. So it wasn't like I was going to make a life of, like, this is where I'm going to be, staying. So I really didn't give a shit. I'd choke him out. One time this guy tells me, he's like, man, Montana, he says, man, I seen you walking across the street. You had your arm around that sex offender. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? He's like, I get close from your fucking ground. I'm like, fucking piece of worm. What you fucking want to do? Huh? You want to, and he's just like, I'm like, yeah, you fucking piece of shit. And I'm smacking him. And anyway, I'm not saying all this is appropriate necessarily. That's not who I am now. But
do these sex offenders fight back?
No, they're not fighting back. And so finally, that's actually what happened. We had one called Super Mo. And I went in there to the bathroom. I had told him, hey, don't look at me. Don't come around me, And then like later on, I look over, and he was just sitting there staring at me. And so he went in the bathroom. I went in there and bashed his face on the fucking sink. I mean, literally just bam, just lit him up a little bit and walked out. And a lot of times they won't tell. And the reason that they won't tell is because they're scared of getting shipped somewhere too. And then they've got to start all over, and maybe there's a guard that puts them on a place they can't be. And so, you know, I have some controversial thoughts on a lot of that. It's not just with the sex offenders, Ian. Let me tell you something. It's with everybody. It's with the dudes that are all tatted up, fucking face tatted, neck tatted, gang members. You know what I mean? And to be real, a lot of those dudes ain't doing fucking shit. I see it every day. I see people that got out of prison. I see some of the things that they're, you know what I mean? You know, they're too hard for the yard, you know? And I've been to so many places where there's like sex offenders on the yard, and there's all these like, you know, gang members. You know, some of them are like pretty heavy gangs, you know, and they don't do shit to them. And then they get out of prison and they tell all their homies, yeah, I was in there doing hard time. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And I'll be honest with you, for me, you know, no offense, you know, and I'm not saying everyone's like that, but look, the fact of the matter is, bro, you wasn't in there smashing no sex offenders. You know, people think that these child molesters are going to prison and they're being harmed. This ain't the 70s, man. That's not what's happening. They're completely and utterly protected. I mean, you put hands on a sex offender, you know what they do? They fucking ship you. I don't give a fuck about getting shipped. I do time anywhere. I mean, I've been doing time my entire life. I mean, just being honest with you. So for me, I don't care if I get shipped. I got paperwork to the moon. I got stacks of it. Everything about me is online. You can go Google it and look it up and be like, oh, fuck, here it is. It's all there. You know what I mean? I've got my FBI files and I've got all the which just is important for me and for the way that I carry myself in there. It's important that I don't have just an envelope with my docket sheet saying that I'm not a rat. They've taken out all the paperwork in the federal prison system that would show if you told on somebody. So everybody has their docket sheet, and it just shows basically, oh, he had a court hearing for this, a court hearing for that, right? It doesn't say that you didn't tell on anybody, you know, just because. And so a lot of them, different districts, a lot of them will have like little padlocks next to them, you know? And it's like, you know, so a lot of people in prison and even in the USPs and other gang members and other races, I had a lot of times they would come to me and they'd be like, hey, Montana, you know, very privately, you know, they'd be like, hey, you know, we got a homie, we heard some shit. Would you look at his paperwork for me? This is his docket sheet. And that's something you really got to be careful with. You know, I'm white. I didn't really run with anybody ever in there. I never ran with no gangs. I'm white, so no matter what, I'm white. I mean, I'm running with the whites, you know. But I didn't politic. I didn't go sit at the big white, I sat at like white tables, you know what I mean? Sat where I wanted to in those situations, you know, but there's like gang tables. And I stayed away and I taught people, you know, hey, look, you know, there's got, you know, white gang tables. And they'd say, Montana, man, come sit with us, bro. And I would always be, you know, hey, thank you, brother. I appreciate, you know, the offer, you know, because once you start sitting there and hanging out with them, you know, you're going to start hearing all these politics and things, and they're going to ask you, hey, what do you think, Montana? You know, this dude did this and this dude did that, you know what I mean? And next thing you know, you're kind of in the mix of things, you know? And so I tried to stay away from all that. And one of the things that allowed me to do that, Ian, was the fact that I have all my paperwork. I have every word spoken in my cases. I have transcripts from trials. I have my pre-sentence report, the PSR, which, you know, people can't have in there. And if you told it's in your PSR, it's like, that's your big report, you know, that they make for the judge to tell them how to sentence you. You're not allowed to have that. I was my own attorney. So I have that, you know, and I had 3 copies hidden throughout all my paperwork. And in one place I went, USP Beaumont, matter of fact, my first one, they went through it pretty heavy. I was surprised. And they found most of 2 of them. So I was left with only 1 and part of 1. And so, you know, I had to make more copies though. And so, but long story short, it gave me a little bit more credibility, you know, if you would. And so, you know, it's like, you know, when you get to federal prison, anytime you get transferred, you know, as soon as you get to a new prison, which, you know, I've been to a lot, you know, they're like, oh yeah, man, it's all about the paperwork. And it's funny because let me be real with you. Most of the dudes that want to see your paperwork don't have clean paperwork. You know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
bro.
100%.
It's a fucking joke, bro. It's like, you know, especially when you get into the lows even more, you know what I mean? It's like all these dudes are running around checking paperwork and you're like, dude, there's no way. And you can talk to them and you know, if you have I have a very legal mind and I understand the federal law, you know, intrinsically. And it's like, oh yeah, I had 20 pounds of meth. You know what I mean? They gave me 6 years. And, you know, and you're like, okay, 20 pounds of meth, sentencing guideline, you know what I mean? You start adding it all up and, you know, it's all math in the feds. They don't just pick a number to sentence you to. It's so it's like, how did you get to such a low level? You know, you got 6 years. Like, no, it sounds like you got 12 and maybe you got a 50% reduction, you know, for testifying or agreeing to testify. And then a lot of these people don't know. And a lot of the plea agreements, there's wording in there. So my brother was going to take a plea agreement in our federal case. He said, I'll plead guilty. And he only said he would if they would take out this one sentence. And they actually refused. And the sentence said, you agree to cooperate in any and all future proceedings, you know what I mean, concerning like this case. And it was basically, and so it was like, it's a contract. People are like, this is a contract you're signing here. So later on, he gets sentenced. And then later on, one of his friends is selling dope and they come to him, hey, you're going to go to court and testify on this dude. And he says, no, they can like, we're taking back your agreement and you're going to get sentenced, you know, to what you were gotten. And so they use that leverage and that's how the federal system operates. And so anyways, I've seen that, you know, a lot. And, you know, a lot of times without paperwork now, no one knows that you're hot except for your co-defendant that you told on. And you've got separatees on him. So he can't even be in the same prison as you. And so what happens is nobody wants to transfer. If you're hot and you're on a yard, you definitely don't want to get a transfer, right? Because you're comfortable. No one knows. You got friends, you got homies, you know, dudes that are going to back you up. And so you don't want to do anything that's going to get you shipped. And so if you're already a rat, you'll do anything secretly. So if there's someone, you know, like me who maybe is getting close to fucking thinking like, I don't know, bro, something's up with this dude. You know, you're going to go fucking tell the cops or something like, hey, counselor, like this dude's fucking checking paperwork or something, you know, try to get me jammed up so I get out of there because I'm a threat to your livelihood. You know, it's just, and so these are the things that happen in there. And it's all these deep, dark chess moves happening, you know, and it really is like a game of chess. And you've got to constantly, you know, and fortunately for me, you know, since I was, you know, 10 years old, I've been playing this chess game, you know, of incarceration. And so it was a lot more easy for me and I'm able to watch things. And so I smashed the child molester there and they shipped me. So Ian, they shipped me to, what the fuck was that dumbass place? I don't know. I'd have to look at the map. But they shipped me to a medium security prison. Didn't last very long. And there were sex offenders on the yard. And the day I got there, I got in a fight with a dude who had made some kind of comment about me. I don't remember what it was, but it was something that like I didn't like the way that he said it. You know what I mean? It was like saying like, I was suspicious or something. You know what I mean? I don't fully remember. All I remember is that the way he said it in the room, you know what I mean? Whatever it wasn't right. It wasn't what he was saying was I felt, you know, it was like he was trying to throw something at me. And so I fucking got it with him right then and there. I don't hesitate. You don't wait. I don't wait for someone to get a knife. I don't wait for someone to go get their friends. I don't wait for someone to go tell. If shit's going to go down and I know like, look, it's going down, I'm trying to gain the advantage. And that's just part of, you know, survival, you know. You're not going to wait for somebody to prepare better. You know, if shit's going to go down, they should have prepared before they started talking shit, but they're not thinking that this guy's going to. And so I did. And so that kind of started me out already with, like the white dudes on that yard because this dude had already been there and I just got there. They don't know me and you just beat this dude up, you know what I mean? And I beat his ass, you know what I mean? Just being honest, like, and so it's like, oh, you think you're tough? Like, no, I don't think I'm tough, man. None of them, he didn't actually call you a rat, you know, but whatever he said was close enough, basically. You know what I mean? And so I started telling all the white dudes, I got along with some of them right away, you know, and I was like, hey, let's clean this yard. So Let's get the child molesters off this yard. And it's kind of hard to do, but it can be done. It can be done. Everyone has to just start, getting them. And then, you're all going to get locked down and there's going to be some casualties. Some of us are going to get shipped. You know what I mean? They're going to be like, all right, well, we're shipping you to a USP now. And that's the big scare thing for all these dudes. Oh, don't want to go to a USP. Let me tell you something. Out of all the 14 federal prisons I've been to, from camps, lows, mediums, and USPs, 3 USPs, multiple mediums, camps, transfer centers, I would rather be in USP or camp. Like if I could pick one, I'd rather be in a camp. But if I can't be in a camp, I would rather be in a USP than a medium or a low. Because you've got so much more respect at a USP. Like if you're a dumbass and you just talk greasy to people, or you get high and you can't pay your bills, or you're a rat, or you've got some past sex offense no one knows about, you don't want to go to a USP. But, if you're a good dude and you're solid, you're not a rat, you're not a sex offender, you're not an idiot, the USP is the place to be. It's cool. Everybody, you meet some really good people there. And that's usually where like the more cream of criminals are, the more criminally minded, instead of just the ones who are like, yeah, my homies were smoking meth. I had a pistol. I was running around like an idiot and got pulled over and I got 10 years and now I'm in prison. And so they go into prison and what do? They hurry up and get a fucking neck tattoo. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you, man. This might be controversial. And I know a lot of dudes who have facial tattoos and neck tattoos and hand tattoos. And a lot of them are really good, solid fucking dudes. Killers or, solid dudes. But the majority of them aren't. If I was a rat, the first thing I would do when I got to prison would probably get my neck blasted. And I'm going to be truthful, man. I'm giving it to you, bro.
Why? It's a little cover
You know
up.
damn well what I'm talking about, Ian. Nobody says it. I don't think so. Because I've seen some of your people here and that you've had, and some of them are, seem all right. I'm sure there's some good dudes and some are maybe seem full of shit. And I'm sure in the comments there's going to be a bunch of little fucking pussies running their mouth about me. I'm cool with that, bro. It's cool. You know what I mean? That's what you do. I get on there and run my mouth about these dudes, that seem inauthentic, but I'm authentic and I don't lie. One of the things I learned years ago when I started is like, not lying, the 4 agreements, always tell the truth. And it's a great book. That thing saved my life and changed my life a lot. The 4 agreements. Have you read that?
No, I haven't. I'll check it out.
Every prisoner should read it. Don't lie, always be precise. Anyways, it's really like amazing. Don't take anything personally. Nothing other people do is because of you. And when I really started understanding that, it made it easier in prison and I didn't fight as much anymore. Like towards the last 3 years of my sentence, I really started changing quite a bit. And I realized people would get mad. I had a guy in state prison come yell at me in my face, "Motherfucker, I'll tear you apart." Big dude doing life. And in the past, what I probably would have done was de-escalate the situation. I probably would have went and microwaved something in the fucking microwave, some water, and douched his ass with it. You know what I mean? Because he was big, and I probably couldn't take this dude. And he was big and angry and a big dude. We were talking about religion with somebody, and he was Jewish, and I was telling this dude, well, Muslims actually, if you think about it, their religion is actually pretty solid. I was like, I'm not religious, but I was telling him because I had a friend that was Muslim, and he ran a lot of shit down to me, and it was interesting. But anyways, and so this dude just got mad, and all of a sudden, it was in my face, like, "Motherfucker!" And I was like, "Whoa!" Like, "Hey, man." Look. So, but in the past, but instead, I didn't take it personally. Like he's living the life and doing what he wants to do because of the agreements that he has made with himself on how to live his life and how to treat people and how to respond to certain stimulations and situations. And so I was like, "Hey, man, yeah, I ain't got no problem with you, dude." You know what I mean? I was like, and he's like, "Get in your fucking house." I'm not going to get in my house. I'm not a bitch. So I stood there and I didn't escalate the situation. I learned about not escalating and watching my body language and my, those nonverbal cues. And I said, "Hey, man, by the way, I didn't get to meet you before. My name's Ben McChesney." And I just kept eye contact with him and, straight face. Like, "I don't need to fucking meet you." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool, man." And I was like, "So anyways, no disrespect to you." I kept the tone low. But I learned these things, these de-escalation techniques that I never learned before. In the past, it was like, I got to get it right now. And so, he walked away, and at the end, right before the end, I told him, I said, "Hey, you need a hug, man?" And he was like, "What?" I was like, you know what I mean? I don't know what you're going through, bro, or if you are going through anything. I'm like, "But if you need a hug or you want to just talk." He's like, "I don't need a hug, dude." And he left, but I thought, you know, you could see him thinking. And later on, he came to me. He's like, look, bro, usually if I get in a situation with somebody, they can't live in the unit no more with me. You know what I mean? He's like, because I'm not going to watch my back, you know? And I was like, yeah. He's like, are we cool? I said, listen, bro, come in the house, bro. Let's come talk. And I got really good friends with the dude. You know what I mean? Like we ended up being, you know, and it was like, you know, later on, he's like, you have any problems, you let me know, I'll handle them. You're getting your parole, brother. You know, I got life, you don't, you know, so let me deal with anything. And so, you know, it was, you know, using people that could, you know, help me and just in life in general. And so, but he was always like, man, I can't believe it. That day you asked me if I need a hug, you know, and that's kind of like the 4 agreements. So I started really changing the last, you know, 3 or 4 years of my life. I actually had 3 books that I read over and over, and only 3 books. And that's it. I didn't read anything else because I said, if I can master these 3 books, then I'll be good. And, you know, that was it. One was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Amazing book. I've got 3 copies, you know, they're highlighted. I got them in my glove boxes of my cars. And the other one was 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. And the other was The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And those was it. I'd read them and then I'd try to teach other inmates. I'd say, hey, you know, I learned, you know, in Think and Grow Rich, you know, basically how the conscious mind is the gateway to the subconscious. And so my whole life, Ian, I never realized that by thinking about crime and allowing myself to think about crime, that it was leaking into my subconscious mind, you know, this fertile garden that will grow anything. And so I started realizing that I can't allow myself to think bad thoughts. So you have to be your own parent. And that's actually what drug me out of it is I have an avatar of me in there. So, you know, you've got the angel and the demon, you know, it's all the same thing, but you can't let the demon win, you know? And so the only way is to make the angel stronger. And so it's the same thing. And so I have to be my own parent because I never really, I love my parents, don't get me wrong, but I never really had parents. I didn't really have, I was guided mostly growing up by other criminals and kids that were wild and guards and treatment teams. And so I have becoming my own parent. So if I have a bad thought now, I instantly get myself in trouble. I have to. So if I'm driving down the road and I see a pawn shop, it's like gold and silver pawn shop. And I'm thinking like, dang, I wonder what kind of security they have.
Let me go rob the joint.
Right. I've got to stop and I've got to tell myself, hey, dude, what's fucking wrong with you? Why would you even allow those thoughts to come into your mind? And that's actually the key, I think, to staying out of prison. One of the keys, you know, it's a whole ring. And so I would teach that to people in there about becoming stronger in the mind and creating that parent avatar to where you have to get in trouble with yourself. And for me, truthfully, I mean, that did it. It's hard at first, but the discipline, you can't just say, you've got to stop what you're fucking doing and you've got to go somewhere peaceful and quiet and you've got to get in trouble with yourself. You got to put yourself in the corner for your thoughts because the thoughts turn to actions, you know, thoughts are words, words are actions become who you are, you know, all those little, and I'm like, damn. And so when I really started doing that, it really, and lying, I mean, God, you know, I don't think we ever realize how much we lie just in general when it doesn't even need to be. And so always telling the truth, you know, that was one of the 4 agreements. And then there's also a segment, you know, in 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. And I pretty much cut lying like out of my life. You know, it's been like 5.5 years. And, you know, it gets you in trouble sometimes. Sometimes it makes me too open, you know, and you say things, you know, that maybe you shouldn't have, you know, doesn't mean that you have to say everything, you know, but it's just great. You be like, who I am, you know, like, I don't care if people know I'm a felon, for instance. I don't give a shit, dude. Everything in my life guided me to being who I am today. So, you know.
So you get out of prison, you beat the case that from that federal sentence at like the 6-year mark.
Yep.
What happened?
So I got out, I beat the case. You know, I was in county jail waiting to go back to the feds, you know, and I called this girl that I was kind of loosely talking to, and her dad is a really good local attorney and her stepmom. And I called her up And she's like, you beat your case. You beat your case. I'm like, what? She's like, you're going home. The judge just signed the order today. And I'm like, what? No way. She's like, yeah, you're coming home. I was like, holy shit. She's like, you can come live with me. And I was like, yeah, that was not the plan, So I was like, So anyways, and I told everyone in jail, yeah, I beat my case. Everyone started kicking the doors and the whole place was rocking. It was pretty cool. And the guards ended up coming down saying, pack your shit. I got out, and this good kid, Tyson Heisler, good kid, he's like, look, bro, I'm going to prison. You can have all my clothes. And he had a lot of really nice, 'cause I'm like, I don't have no clothes or nothing. And I had he had all nice clothes and shoes, all his packed up in boxes and tubs at his sister's. And I went over there and she's like, hey, he told me give them all to you. So that was great. I'm really good friends with him still to this day. He's back in jail, unfortunately. But so I, had to, close right away and it was, pretty wild. And so I was like, look, I don't want to get in trouble or anything. So I ended up kind of staying with that girl, Lisa. She's cool. And then I met my wife, and a friend of mine was like, hey, bro, you got to meet my old lady's sister. She works over here at Burger King. And I went over and I'm like, oh, wow. She's a pretty girl, and we had a good time and talked to her, and, I fixed her car for her. It was something simple. And then she was like, oh, I'll pay you for that. I'm like, nah, I just got to go out on a date with me. Let's go to a movie, and she's like, all right, cool. And then, I was like, I don't really like to go to movie theaters. Let's just go watch a movie at home, and I hate movie theaters. I hate anywhere. I don't go to comedy shows. I don't really like to go out at all. I mean, I go out. I just don't. Anyways, I don't like to have appointments. I don't like to have somewhere that I have to be at all. It makes me feel controlled. So, I don't like I can imagine having a job, just, I like working for someone that could fire me and then basically I don't like my life being in the control of anybody else at all, possibly. I want to be in complete control of everything. And so anyways, I met her, and so we got together, and, she was, I was very attracted to her. She was hot. She's fucking nuts, it just, she was only 19 at the time. And my stepson, he has Down syndrome, just a fucking amazing little boy, he was just awesome. And I loved being his dad, it was just, he needed that like raw male presence, They're like little cavemen, you know what I mean? And it's like, ooh, big wolf mad, and so, cause he'd hit his mom a lot and stuff. And I'd be like, hey, and I'd grab him by his shirt, and I'd pick him up, and you could see his eyes just go wide, and he'd be like, ooh, big wolf, angry. Like in my mind, that was like, he was like realizing like, hey, and I'd be like, don't you hit your mom, you be nice, and I loved that boy, he was great. And so, she decided that she didn't want to be married, you know what I mean? Well, so I'm trying to, anyway, sorry, my mind of, let me see, I'm trying to like process how to give it in the best, shortest, because it was such a influential part of my life and my future. The only time I'd been married, and so she decided she didn't want to be together. She had an ex-boyfriend wanted to be with her, and then she came back to me, and this went back and forth, and finally we decided to get married. So we got married on December 23rd. A couple of days before Christmas, went down to the courthouse, and I was thinking maybe this will let her know that I'm serious and I just want to have, a good, peaceful life. And by the way, we never fought, which is really interesting. We never, ever, ever had any fighting, any arguments. We got along great. It was amazing, right? But there was something else that was always going on in her mind, and her mother hates men. I mean, just being honest with you. So her mom would be like, you don't need a man. You should leave your man. You don't need a man. And she was living at home before with her mom and paying the bills, and mom kind of wanted her back, just to be honest. Like, I'm trying to say anything bad, but this is what I've got. I'm really close with some of her sisters to this day still. Really good people. And I love them. They're like family to me. And so, and her twin sister, she's a twin. And her twin didn't like her, it was like I was the bad guy, taking her away from her best friend. And so, her twin would tell her, leave him, leave him, leave him. This is a constant thing. And so she'd come home and back and forth. And it was always, she had this going, in her mind. And so, so this happened so after we were together for 1 month, I went and brought her a big basket, and she, of, stuff at work, flowers and everything. And I caught her texting her ex-boyfriend. And So she started lying about it, and I didn't even care. We argued all night, and I finally was like, dude, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? And so the next day, now I wasn't like one of them sneaky guys like trying to find out what my girl's doing. But the next day, now I'm like, all right, well, hold up. So I see on her Facebook, she had added him back. So I messaged her at work. I'm like, hey, why'd you add that dude back? She's like, I didn't add him back. A friend did. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, well, I'll see you when you get off. And so I went to pick her up at work, and she's in the back. She's in the front seat of a cop car. I'm thinking that Burger King got robbed. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, not looking at me. And a cop comes over and he's like, hey, did you assault your wife? I'm like, no, I didn't put hands on my wife at all. Did she say I assaulted her? I'm like, this. He's like, yeah, dude. Like, she says that you assaulted her. I'm like, and she's like 95 pounds. I'm like 220. I'm like, where? If I assaulted her, like, where's the marks? I didn't put hands on her. So they're like, well, she said, she told him I put a knife to her throat. I mean, this is like a pretty, so like, we have to arrest you. And I'm like, dude, there's no way. This is bullshit. Take the knife, put it in a bag, check it for fingerprints, check it for DNA. You know what I mean? I'll take a polygraph. I'm like, whatever you want to do. So I go to jail. Next day I bond out. No contact, you know. And then a few days later, she's hitting me up. I'm so sorry. I'm like, fucking, what did you do? You fucking lied on me. She's like, I'm sorry. So her sisters are calling me and they're like, look, she already told us that she lied. She just decided she didn't want to be married and she didn't want to look like the bad guy because, you know, you're always so good. You know what I mean? I'm not the greatest, but, you know, like she just didn't want to, I'm a good dad to Christopher. And so she didn't want to look bad. So she decided, you know, I'll make this big lie up. Apparently there was one of her managers told her the same thing too. This little dude was like, you're going to have to do something. So anyways, long story short, she goes and tells him, look, I lied. So they drop the charges, but they're not happy. Prosecutors don't ever like dropping charges, whether you're guilty, innocent or not. It's just like, it's something in their DNA where it's like, no, we don't drop charges. You know, we'll take a plea bargain and they don't mind convicting. And this is one of my problems with the justice system. You know, it's like there's many prosecutors that don't mind convicting somebody for something they didn't do. It's fucking weird. I doesn't get it. Like when they find out you didn't do it, instead of just saying, look, you know what? This really didn't happen, right? We're going to drop it. It's like, they can't let it go. It's like, you know, it's like a score. Like I can't have a negative score here. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something that really should change. You know, once they find out you didn't do something, you know, then they should be like, yeah, we're going to drop it. You know, this guy didn't do it. But anyways, so it was a big deal, you know, and I kind of made fun of the prosecutor and danced outside and, you know, you know, kind of egged it on. And so this continued to happen. We got back together. Why? I don't know. I just fucking like, you know, I'm not the greatest guy in the world. I've made mistakes. So it's kind of like, you know, yeah, you made a mistake. You've got a sickness here. You you made a big lie, but you did come and say you came forward and told it. And they even the arresting officer was like, look, I don't believe it. Like she said, I choked her till she passed out, bashed her face on the dash. Just not a mark on her. To this day, I actually have all the police reports and like the picture of her where they write if there's any marks and all that. It's nothing. It's even all the paperwork. I mean, there's nothing. Like they couldn't brutally do this and happen. And so anyways, but whatever. So I got back with her and this went on and on a couple times. She did this again and then went and said she lied. And so now they're like, oh, she's just a abused woman and she's covering for her abuser. You know, I mean, and that probably happens quite a few times, but not in this case. So so we were broken up at one point. I had a business called Magic City Merchandise. So look, I mean, I'll be honest. When I got out of prison, I acquired some money. I took some money from this guy that was selling drugs. I didn't know who he was. And that's a whole nother story, but I went in there and took it, you know, from him. And so I took that money and started my business. And that's all I'd known at the time, you know, like, and so I started this business, Magic City Merchandise. I bought a bunch of like DG sunglasses and watch sets and whatnot, and was doing parking lot sales, you know, entrepreneur. And so I thought I was going to lose my business. I had full custody of my daughter. So she's living with me. And I'm thinking like, I'm going to lose, you know, everything right now. I'm like, I'm broke. All my money's going to these lawyer fees and bonds. And I'm like, so I started thinking, you know, I got to get some financial room. And my mind went back to crime. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to break into a warehouse and just steal something, you know? And so me and my buddy, he never got in trouble for any of this before. So he was never thrown in it. because I'm not a rat, so I'll leave his name out of it, even though, statute of limitations, whatever. But anyways, so I told him, hey, bro, like, need to hit a lick. You know what I mean? And he's like, yeah, for sure, homie. Like, I'm down, let's do it. And so we'd always been scoping out warehouses and stuff all the time. Since we were younger, we broke in a lot of warehouses and semi-trucks. It's like, I'll be honest with you, for a criminal, it's like a grab bag. And it was a lot of like excitement kind of, because it's like, you go break in these semi-trucks, man, and it's like, they're full of engines and tires, and it's like, man, there's all this stuff. Who knows what it is, but there's going to be something, of value in there. And so we picked out this Conway freight. It's, it's called like XPO now. So we picked out the Conway freight. It was it was like just, it sounded bad, but it was like begging to be broke into. I mean, it was like, no lights. It was in an industrial area, with, no other businesses really, easy access points. And so, we stole a FedEx van and hotwired it and took it there, parked it next to the fence, cut a hole in the fence, because I didn't know what we were going to get. And there was really no agreement. Like, for instance, like, I'll tell you something about, as a side note, a lot of people don't understand about conspiracies. So with a conspiracy, you've got to have an agreement between two or more individuals to commit an overt act. And that's actually the legal definition of a conspiracy. And a lot of people don't know, and this is something that's kind of important. A lot of people don't really fully understand what a conspiracy is and how easy you can get charged and convicted for a conspiracy. So a conspiracy is, an agreement between two or more individuals to commit an overt act. So me and you, as an example, if me and you say we're talking drunk at the bar and I'm like, hey bro, I'm going to go down to Mexico and get some Coke. And when I bring it back, we can sell it and make a bunch of money. And now you're like, yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. So that's the agreement. Even if you're drunk and you weren't really like, look, I'm really serious, like trying to turn my life into being a drug dealer. We just made an agreement. Now, it's not a conspiracy under the law yet, right? It's just words at this point. So what happens is some physical action has to be taken to initiate this conspiracy, right? It's almost like taking two chemicals, You've got to actually pour one of them in to have the reaction. And so that's the overt act part of it. And so let's just take, for instance, you forget all about it. We were drunk, drinking, right? The next morning, I go rent a car and I get on the highway and I get pulled over. And the cop says, hey, and I have some weed or whatever reason, and I say, look, man, me and Ian, we're going to sell some drugs. Like, I was going to Mexico to get some Coke and, I was coming back and we were going to sell it. Now that's a conspiracy. Doesn't matter that I didn't have the money to buy the cocaine. Doesn't matter that I never articulated specifically that I'm going to get, X amount of cocaine from this guy named, Juan down here. You know what I mean? Basically, the fact of the matter is two or more people came to an agreement, and then at least one of those people put that agreement into physical action. So now you're sitting at home. It might be 6 months later. Feds bust in your door. You know what I mean? Cuff you up, throw you around. You're charged and you're going, what? Now, whatever the amount was or that I claimed, I could say it was going to be 20 keys, right? That's the weight now in your conspiracy. There never has to have been a 20 kilos of cocaine ever bought, sold, transacted, or even exist. That doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is you conspired with me to get 20 kilos of cocaine from Mexico, to bring them back here and to sell it. And that's it. By the definition, and you can go in there all you want and be like, I didn't have anything to do with it. If they have some kind of evidence, it might just be me up there testifying on you now. Like, what the fuck, this asshole, you went and got a car, got pulled over, and now it's you. And that's how it works. And it's fucked up. And you've been in prison, you've heard the story, so you know what I'm talking about. And anybody that's been to federal prison and actually did some talking about really met people and talked to them, they know the damn well truth too. And that's fucked up, man. Now, I was charged in the last time with something called the Pinkerton theory of liability. Are you aware of that one at all?
No.
So the Pinkerton theory of liability in a conspiracy comes from common law crime, like way back. And it basically says you're liable for any of the actions that your co-conspirators took, whether you knew about it or not, right? Because once me and you make an agreement to commit a crime, so let's say I go shoot somebody down there and steal their drugs, you're now liable. And the reason you're liable is because it should be reasonably foreseeable to you that further criminal conduct could arise through this agreement that we had to begin the drug trade. So it's fucked up. So what happens is they get somebody with a conspiracy somehow and they get them in front of a jury. Well, these jury, they're just regular people, right? And there's no one that's going to explain to them that this is not really cool. So they're just like, what? I don't know. We don't know what's going on. And I'll be honest with you, man, between me and you, I fucking hate juries. I do not do jury trial. I would always take a judge trial if it was possible. Only because, man, juries, I'll be honest, in my experience, dude, I mean, they'll convict a ham sandwich just like a grand jury will indict one. You know, I mean, they're just like, I don't know. We don't really know what's going on here. Sounds like maybe he could have done it. You know, we didn't see any video. We didn't see any fingerprints. We didn't see any evidence, you know, other than this guy getting up here. Well, they don't know this guy's getting 10 years off his sentence for telling on you. They don't know that this guy's been pressured by his lawyer and his fiance and their kids and all of his friends and his roommate and his cellie to say whatever he has to do to save his own skin. And the jury doesn't get to see all that. They don't know that. They don't see the behind the scenes. They see the guy up there saying, they don't see like the guy, Lonnie Vandersloot, you know, that the friend of mine that went and told, you know, he's trying to get time off. They don't see that. They're not like, hey, he's trying to get out and see his kids, so he's just willing to say anything. And so
you pull the tractor trailer up to the building?
No, we broke into all the tractor trailers, and then I found some guns, man. I just happened to find these guns, you know, and took them, lined them all up. I took all the dollies from this because I actually went into the trailers, and then I finally went into the place and lined them up on the dollies and strapped them down and just rolled all the dollies out and threw them into the truck, into the van. So once I realized, you know, what I'd done, I knew that, you know, like one of my bolt cutters broke, and I had someone drive by and throw me another pair. And so I threw those in a dumpster next door. But now I went back to that dumpster and pulled the bolt cutters out to take them with me. So I made sure I actually went where they had broke and got some of the little bolts, you know, and then kicked the rest of them because I just didn't want anything there, you know, no fingerprints, no nothing. And so, and then I took the FedEx van back to FedEx.
Wait, why was there just guns sitting in these trailers?
I don't know. So, I mean, apparently it was some warehouse shipping them. I mean, I found out later, you know, in the discovery. So it was a company that like sells guns or something, some sporting good company. And they were decided that they had too many guns or whatever. So they were shipping them from one warehouse to store in another warehouse.
What kind of guns were in the crate?
Pistols, rifles, shotguns, pretty much a plethora of all of that.
So you thought you hit the mother load?
Yes and no. Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I didn't want to take the guns. I wanted TVs. I wanted some some pallets of some kind of electronics that I could sell. And if I got caught, would be basically a slap on the wrist. I'd bond out of jail. I'd get a lawyer. I'd make some agreement for probation, some deferred time served, something. So I didn't really want the guns, but I was desperate, and financially I was like, so when I saw them, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I could do this. And then something I learned in the drug program, the RDAP in the federal prison system, was super optimism. So my super optimism kicked in, and I said, you're smart enough to do this, Ben. You know what I mean? You take them all to someone who will just take them out of the country, every one of them. You could get away with this. You get the money. No one will ever know. You've got no fingerprints here. You've got no DNA. I've got I'm good. And that minute of, I could do this. That's where the decision was made, with me personally in my mind. You know what I mean? No one even knew about the guns. I was the only one in the world that even knew, you know what I mean? And so that's when I went and said, all right, I'm going to take these guns. And so I took them, man. I took them and threw them in the van. And my buddy, he had already hotwired the van. I told him, hey, we need a van. I called him up. Good kid, man. I said, hey, bro, he's, my co-defendant. We went down together. We went to trial together. And my other buddy's the one that never was involved. But so we brought the van back. We went and unloaded them and brought the van back in a place that was making apartments, brand new apartment complex that wasn't open yet. Because I was thinking, there's got to be a tracker in here, right? I was like, dude, these things, they got to be some kind of GPS tracker in these, there's not just going to be sitting here. The trailer wasn't even locked, by the way. It didn't even have a padlock on it. It had a little piece of metal, with 2 pieces of lead on the other sides. Apparently, it was never supposed to be there. It was supposed to have been shipped already, but the guy got it there too late. So they said, just lock the thing up and let's go home. So it's just this semi-trailer just sitting outside of a warehouse fucking with guns in it. No padlock. I mean, So we went and dropped them all off. We took the FedEx van back to FedEx because there's no point, put it back, kind of made it look all nice, made sure everything was cool. And that, to this day, they never could figure out what vehicle was used. I mean, there's no point telling them. I mean, and so then we went and ripped through all of them boxes, man, looking for GPS for hours. I'm like, there has to be something here, but there wasn't. So we rented a Suburban, loaded them up in there, and took them to L.A. and sold them to a guy that a friend of mine knew down there, and so that guy. He's supposed to be this, solid guy, so to speak, I mean, he works for a cartel and he's got all this stuff going on, and moving shit around the country. I didn't know the guy. I just met him. That he actually flew up from LA to Salt Lake to see if he wanted to buy him. Because I had another possibility. I could have took him to New Mexico, someone else I know. And so I was like, I could take him either or. So this guy just got first dibs, basically. He flew up. I showed him, look, this is what it is, And he says, yeah, I want them. I'll take them all. And I was like, well, it's $50,000. And he was like, cool. Can you bring them to L.A.? And I was like, that's $3,500 more. So he gives me the 35. And then I didn't drive them. My co-defendant had him drive them. He drove them down there. And we got down there. And the guy pulls up to the hotel. I get in Fontana. And I call him up. I'm in LA. He's like, where are you at? I'm like, I'm in Fontana. He's like, yeah, you can't get a little closer. That's the first town, getting into LA. I'm like, look, man, I'm here, bro. I'm not trying to go any further than I have to. And so he shows up and he's got a truck and he says, look, bro, I don't got all the money yet. I'm like, oh man, what do you mean? And he's like, look, I got 30 now. He's like, and I got the rest coming. And I tell him, all right, man. I'm like, well, let's get these things moved into your truck. So I get them all moved in there and he gives me the 30 and another car pulls up and he's got 5 more. And then he's got all these fucking bags of weed, and it's still wet, but it's good weed. It's not. And so anyways, I'm like, dude, I don't want that weed. Anyways, it gets into the woods and the weeds here, so to speak. But long story short, the guy still owed me $10,000. And I call my buddy back in Montana who knows this guy. He got a lot of weed from him. That's all he ever got. He always got weed from him. The guy tried to push other crap on him. And he's like, no, I just want the weed. We have never been into any of the other stuff. So he says, I said, hey, can I trust this guy? And he's like, yeah, dude, fuck yeah, you can trust him. So the dude left. So my co-defendant, I had a pickup truck. I just said him and his girlfriend took that. I gave him, his money and they went their ways and I stayed down there. And so I was already going to buy a car and I didn't have any money. I had been driving a little Volkswagen Fox around, because, when I was broke up with my wife, so I just let her take the car. And so I didn't have any money or anything really. So I've been driving this Volkswagen Fox. So I'm like, shit. so I'm looking up, I found a BMW convertible in Pasadena, I was like, great deal, like $8,000. In Montana, it looks like a $30,000-$40,000 ride, and down in LA, a little 3 Series BMW convertible is, what, a high school kid drives. And so I'm actually on the way to Pasadena in a cab, and I get the call, and it's my buddy in Montana, and he's like, hey, bro, this dude fucking doesn't want him anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, he wants to pick and choose. Well, there was a lot of 22s in there, like 1911 models, but they were 22s. And he says he doesn't want all those. He just wanted, all the real good shit. And I said, well, bro, he doesn't get to pick and choose. I told him in the beginning, it's all or nothing, bro. And I told him, like, you got to take all these and like get them out. Like, they're always going to be forever linked. To this day, every single one of those is linked. If the cops run a VIN number on one of them guns, it's going to come up the Conway freight theft from Billings, So, it was really not cool. This dude didn't want to do the deal, he says now. Well, I'm not giving him the money back I already got. So we get him on 3-way, and so we're arguing. And I'm telling him, look, bro, this ain't Walmart. Like, you know what I mean? You're supposed to be a good dude. We made this deal in good faith. You said that you would pay me the rest of the money, and now, you know what I mean? And he's like, well, I just want something. I'm like, no, bro, I ain't doing it like that. He's like, I just can't. There's nothing I can. I'm like, oh, bro, I'm just saying. It's funny because this whole time, by the way, the cab driver, he can hear something's going on, and he's like, what the fuck are they talking about, But so finally, I just tell him, I tell my buddy, I act like my buddy. I'm like, well, you owe me when I get back. He doesn't know that he's in on all of it. He's 50-50 with everything, basically. So I'm like, I'm like, when I get back, you owe me. So gets Fontana, buy the BMW. I fucking drive. I put it on a dolly, a U-Haul, and drive it back to Montana. And then that's it. And then, I'm now financially a little more stable. So months and months go by, and I kind of feel the heat, like I'm like, something ain't right, This is a pretty big deal up there, for law enforcement. It's over and over again. It's on the newspaper and it's on the news. Police have no leads. This happened, all this time ago, and they're still looking for him. Anybody has any information, there's rewards. And nobody really knew, but my co-defendant, his girlfriend, knew. So he had left her. So she got mad that he left her. So she started trying to get him back. Meanwhile, he's got a new girlfriend. So they get to fighting with each other on the phone all the time. And it's like, I'll shoot you. Fuck you, bitch. He's mine. And it's just, you know what I mean? Like, this was between the girls and him, if that makes sense. So they get into all this, this arguments, basically. And my sister had known a little bit what went on, and they had went down there and subpoenaed her. And anyways, and she'd apparently said something to this girl while the guy flew up to Salt Lake. My sister took her and her kids out and apparently said something to her like, hey, they're using you to cover the fact that they've got a bunch of guns. And then, I don't know, there's all different kind of conflicting things in that, and came out, that maybe she saw a gun, but she never saw any of these firearms, by the way. Never. And at trial, she said that she saw them, and I pressed her. And then she said, I saw them. I'm like, well, what brands were they? What were they? Like, she's going to say a brand that wasn't in there. Then I'm going to be like, well, and she just lied. She just said, oh, they were in a tote. I'm like, a tote? What kind of tote? She's like a plastic tote. I was like the little square tote, and you saw them? She's like, it was clear. I'm like, it was a clear tote. Anybody, that's why I said the juries, anybody could tell that, like, this girl is not telling the truth. And that should be like, you know what, how much do we believe of all of her testimony? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, what kind of guns? She's like, well, they were boxes. I was like, they were boxes. So you didn't see any guns. You saw gun boxes? They were gun boxes. And then I'm like, so what were they? Did they have like names on them? Well, no. I'm like, well, how do you know what was in them? They were just cardboard boxes. And by the way, what happens is this whole time at a trial like this, you're fighting the prosecutor. Objection, because they're like, they don't want to see their case unravel or see just come out. So they're just, and then when the jury's over, they're like, huh, what? She's saying this, he's asking this guy's yelling objection, the judge is banging it. It's a fucking charade, man. It's a whole charade of, anyways. And then the juries are like, well, we don't really know what happened, but he probably wouldn't be here if he's not guilty. So let's just go ahead and find him guilty. So yeah, I end up back in Montana. Let's see, where were we at? I got off track for a minute. I'm sorry.
So the girlfriend was getting mad.
So the girlfriends were fighting. Yeah. So his girlfriend, trying to tie it back in. So his girlfriends, his ex-girlfriend and his new girlfriend are fighting, and they're arguing back and forth and talking about shooting each other. I mean, this is them. Has nothing to do with us. I don't even know this. I actually found this mostly out, like at trial and in the discovery. So his girlfriend and ex-girlfriend decide to meet up at some point at a storage unit, and there was some gunplay. So they started shooting at each other. And his ex-girlfriend got shot in the eye by his new girlfriend. And it took out, like she lived. Thank God she lived. It took out like a whole, piece of her. But she lived. Her kids were in the car. So I guess like her, and I wasn't there, so I don't really, but her kids were in the car, and her husband, she's fighting over, my co-defendant, but the whole time, she's with her husband, and anyways, this is it's a mess. But, and so apparently like they had a gun and they threatened his girlfriend. And so my co-defendant's new girlfriend is sitting on his lap in the passenger seat of this truck, and they pull up to the windows together, and there's some kind of a gun battle. Like they start shooting at each other. And, this girl ends up in the hospital, of course. And then after that, more started coming out. And her mom came up and was like, yeah, these guys stole these guns, some guy named Ben. And then, the local cops are like, that could only be one guy, we know who. And so, and they probably, I don't know for sure, but they were probably already like, I have a couple friends, one of them's a bondsman, former bondsmen, and some people that I know, and they were already like, bro, like, I remember this bondsman, after it happened, it was in the paper. And first time I seen him, he was like, hey, dude, did you see that shit in the paper? Someone stole all them guns? I'm like, oh, yeah, I heard about that. He's like, bro, I ain't gonna lie. He's like, first thing I thought of was like, that's gotta be Ben. I said, damn, bro. He's like, no, I know you didn't do it. I'm like, yeah, why would I do that? He's like, it was just my first thought. And so if it was his first thought, it was probably a lot of people's first thoughts. I mean, Billings isn't, that big. It's also not that small, but so they were probably already like, we think it's him. Let's tie it to him somehow. Even if it wasn't, I might have got convicted. But anyways, so yeah. And so after that happened, she got her discovery. His new girlfriend got her discovery. And in the discovery, it had my name. So she released her discovery to my co-defendant's sister. My co-defendant's sister calls me up. She's like, hey, Ben, I got this discovery. I'm like, look, I'll give you $200. And she's like, your name's in it. I'm like, go to Kinko's and get it all copied. So she goes and makes a full copy of this. Meanwhile, the next day, the feds find out that she released all of her discovery documents to my co-defendant's sister. So they get a warrant and they go raid her house to get this discovery back. Like, it's just the paperwork. Like, they're just... Anyways, and so they get it back. I already had a copy, the whole thing. They didn't know that. But, and just to show you as a side note, so what they did is they actually found a newspaper. She had newspapers, one of the ones from the gun theft. They took that newspaper, they set it down, right? They took a card I had sent her years before from prison with my picture in it. They set it on the newspaper. They pulled my picture out, right? And staged this whole looking thing. And they took a photocopy of that, right? And that ends up in my discovery later. Like, what? It's like literally, you know what I mean? It's kind of like what they did with Trump, you know what I mean? Like where they found out they were pulling out, confidential documents and putting them in different spots and trying to, it was all that stuff, with Mar-a-Lago, and it came out like they were staging it a little bit, and so it's kind of like, dude. But anyways, so I knew, look, man, the word's out. Like, they're going to get me. Like, they're coming for me, like it's only a matter of time. And so what ended up happening is I was flying down with my friends to Vegas the next day, and I was dropping my daughter off at her grandma's house, and all of a sudden, couple, I thought I was getting robbed. Like a Suburban pulled up, a truck pulled up, they blocked me in. And they jumped out, but they didn't pull any guns on me. But at first I was like, who is this? I go to throw it in reverse and I see someone, I'm like, what the fuck? And they're like, hey, man, it was, U.S. Marshals and task force. They didn't pull any guns or anything. My daughter was already in the house. And they were like, hey, man, we got a warrant for you, dude. I said, all right, man. Well, let me say goodbye to my wife. I gave her my wallet. And she's like, what's going on? I was like, it's over. Like, I'm thinking, it's over with, right? Like, they got me. Like, the feds are here. I said, write me, I guess, man. Have a good life. And I get in the car. They cuffed me, and I get in the Suburban, and they take me to the jail. But I hear them on the phone, and they're like, "Yeah, we're bringing McChesney in," and they're like, "Oh, the bond on that's $50,000." And I was like, "There's a bond?" And they were like, "Yeah." I was like, "This isn't federal." There's no bond in feds like that. I said, and they're like, "No, were you expecting it to be?" I said, "Well, why are you guys arresting me?" And they're like, "Oh, well, we're whatever, we're arresting you, we're helping out." And so I get to the jail. I'm like, I got a bond. And it's some bullshit, bogus ass misdemeanor that I already beat a partner family member for my wife when she lied. I've already beat this, but they decided to turn it into a felony. Right now, months and months later, they knew it was bogus, but at least it would get me in jail because the feds, they got to go to a grand jury to get an indictment on you.
They're building a case.
They're building a case, and they're like, get him in jail before we get a grand jury to indict him. Well, fuck, I had a lot of fucking money at the time, man. It's from other activities. Took that money that I got and I flipped it pretty heavily. And so I was like, bonding out. I'm like, let's go. $50,000 bond in Montana's at 10%. I'm like, $5,000. I call this bondsman. I'm like, hey, dude. And he's like, yeah, bro, I'll come get you right now. No signature, no nothing from anybody, no collateral, because I had a good name and I've never. So, and I said, hey, I can go to Vegas. I'm leaving for Vegas in the morning. Like, I'm cool, right? The bond just says appear for court. There's no stipulations on travel yet. That happens, when you go to court. And the jail guard's like, yeah, it just says appear. And then the bondsman's like, look, bro, you go to Vegas. I don't care. So I fly to Vegas. Weekend in Vegas, have a good time, fly back. I get home. It's about midnight. Boom, 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 boom. The door's getting beat off the hinges. I'm hearing people beating out there. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Right? So my wife's sister, the twin, I had actually helped her move into an apartment across the street so they could be closer to it. I call her up. She's like, I don't know, man. There's a truck and there's a car. I'm like, is there any cop cars? She's like, no. So I'm like, fuck, someone's trying to rob me. Right? That's my thinking is like, someone's trying to rob me. Like, the word's out that I got money. And so I said, well, call the cops and tell them, and I can't have a gun. I'm a felon, so I don't never fuck with guns. I've been taking them that time. So I'm like, dude, call the cops and tell them, someone's robbing your neighbor. And so she calls me back. She's like, they told me that they were serving a warrant, go back to bed. So I'm like, what the fuck, a warrant? I just bonded out a few days ago. Like, it's just a weekend. Like, how can they have a warrant? So I go into the bathroom. My wife covers me with all the blankets and pillows, right? I'm in the bathtub. And I call the cops because this ain't stopping. They're beating on the windows. I mean, I call the cops and I'm like, yeah, this is Ben McChesney. And my old neighbors told me there's cops over there at my old apartment. And she's like, well, let me transfer you. So she transferred me to one of these guys outside. Dude, they're probably pissed. I shouldn't. So they don't really know, you know what I mean? So hopefully they don't even hear this, but they'll probably be like, that motherfucker the whole time. So, and meanwhile, I got my co-defendant and my other buddy, Chris, are coming to my house, up there. I'm like, hurry up, get up here. Cause I'd already called them actually said, I'm getting robbed. Hurry up, come over here. Like, bring something, like, come. And so I tell him like, hey dude, I don't live there anymore. And now I can hear that they're like intensifying the beating. I think he's trying to hear it through the phone. They're like, dude, if he was in that apartment, they would have heard it through the phone. They're not realizing I'm in the bathtub with just piles of, and I'm a pillow guy, so I have a ton of pillows. Once you go to prison, there's certain comforts. I don't play around with my sheets, my mattresses, my pillows. You know what I mean? Like I have my bedding is like, I don't play with that. So I got a lot of pillows and it's like PTSD, So I tell them, look, dude, I don't live there anymore. They're like, well, we got a warrant. I'm like, look, dude, I already bonded out on that. And they're like, no, we have a new warrant. I'm like, no, how can that be? So I'm like, well, look, I'm going back to bed, dude. Good night. So they leave. And there's only one car of them driving up and down around. So when they're like out of view. I have my wife and stepson run across the street to her sister's. Then I have my co-defendant. He backs up to it was an apartment building. I was in a lower unit. He backs up. So the next time they take a trip, my buddy Chris is down there. So we're all coordinating pretty good. I jump out the window. I jump in his trunk and he pulls off. We're actually at the stoplight and I'm in the trunk and I hear LJ saying, "They're fucking right next to me, bro." And they know what he looks like, you know? So he's like, "Fuck, bro." I'm like, "It's all good, bro." So he turns right, they turn left. And I get away and I call my lawyer, this lady, Lisa Bazant, really cool lawyer. And I call her up and I'm like, "Look, dude," the next day I called her. She's like, "Look, just lay low till court. Don't let them arrest you." So the day of court, her and my investigators got Kent Ewalt, really good dude. He used to be a cop for years. And now he's an investigator. And they're like, "Look, dude, they're trying to arrest you before you even get into court." So I'm like, fuck, I don't want to miss court. So I like have to sneak into the courtroom, into the courthouse. And some people told me like, "Hey, you know, like go this way. This is the way that the cops go over this walkway and come back to." Anyway, so I get in the courtroom and they're like, you know, there's undercovers in there now. There's people, they're like, "Damn, he made it into court." And so the judge, I've got the bondsman there and he's already telling me like, "Look, bro, I'm going to go to bat for you." Like, you know, I'm like, "Dude, I can't afford another $50,000 bond. Like I just fucking lost, you know, $5,000 on the bond the other day. And then I went to Vegas, lost a bunch of money." I'm like, "Dude." And so everybody's there. And the judge calls my case up, you know, McChesney, and I get up and she's like, "Yeah." And then my lawyer's like, "Your Honor, we found out he has another warrant he was informed about. So he wanted to see if we can get that dealt with today." And the judge's like, yeah, that's cool. And the prosecutor jumps up, "Well, Your Honor, wait." And my lawyer's like, "Well, we can just run the bond concurrent since he's already bonded out." And they're like, "Your Honor, he went to Las Vegas." And it was just like contentious in here. And the judge is like, "Did you go to Vegas?" I said, yeah. But I came back. The bondsman's here and he told me I could go. So did the jail. And then he's like telling the prosecutor, "What's the problem? He's here." And she's like, "Well, Your Honor, he left." And he's like, and the judge was like, "Well, there's nothing that says he couldn't leave." And the bondsman's there. He's like, "Your Honor," he stands up and he's telling him like, "Look, you know, if you do give him a bond, I'm ready to post it for him, you know." And he's a good guy. I feel bad because he was just going to post it for me too, like a $50,000 bond without nothing down. And in the end, he kind of ended up taking it in the shorts so the judge gives me a concurrent bond. He's like, "Look, you're here, come to court, no more going to Vegas." I'm like, "All right, cool." So they give me the bond and I get the bonds combined. And I start to kind of plan, like I'm thinking like, man, this, you know, I'm knowing now. So my sister messages me. I put something on Facebook that said, "A true friend will tell you, you know, when your face is dirty," or something. She says, "Your face is dirty, brother, call me." So I'm like, oh, fuck. And so the feds had went down there and told her like, "Look, we're going to subpoena you to a grand jury." You know, and she's, you know, telling them I'm not doing shit. I'm not going to a grand jury. And so I kind of knew. I said, "You know what, dude? Like, it's a matter of time, you know?" And I started thinking to myself, you know, like, so, by the way, I'm in the middle of this big lawsuit because I went to prison 6 years. The federal judge, you know, and he was a good federal judge. I didn't think that the first time, the second time, no. And so he had basically said, "Look, it's your attorney's fault. If he would have done what he should have done, then you would have never went to prison." And so I'm suing my lawyer, you know, and he didn't have insurance apparently. So I actually had lawyers from around the country calling me and they're like, "This is what we do. We specialize in suing other lawyers." It's like a special thing. It's like, you know, the internal affairs of the police department, you know, and so I was like, "Nah, I'm going to do it myself. I can give you 35, 40% of this, you know, I can," because, you know, you've got certain things that have to be proven, you know, the causation and whatnot. And that was already pretty much proven by the judge. So I'm suing him. He runs the federal court, tries to say that he's protected. I'm like filing saying, "No, he's not." They tell him, "You're not." So now we're in the middle of this. Pretty much it's all about the amount, you know, at this point it's going to be. So at some point I'm going to get paid, you know, something. So I'm like, yeah, so now I did this and I'm like, all right, look, I can stay here and, you know, probably be a millionaire and get, you know, who knows how much in prison. I'm thinking a lot, you know, or I can just fucking leave the country, screw that lawsuit and, you know, make it on my own. And I'm pretty confident. So it was a pretty easy decision. I was like, dude, I'm out of here. And so I decided I'm going to go to Mexico. Now, I had friends down there from my first federal prison sentence. And so, I called my buddy and I'm like, hey, bro, like, I'm coming down. Well, he's in jail for shooting someone at a strip club down there in Mexico. So he's like, I'm in jail right now, but don't worry, my brothers are, here, and my mom and dad, you can come stay with them. They all grew up in Chicago. He was a Latin king. And so I'm like, well, look, I got to come. So I sell everything. I'm like, fuck it. I sell all my cars. I start consolidating money. And I had a lot of, stuff I had been accumulating. And so total I got together probably around $60,000, between $50,000 and $60,000. And I'm trading my buddy all his, because we always would like argue who got the $100 bills, and 50s and 20s, you know what, stacks of 20s. And so I traded him all, his. I'm like, you got to give me your hundreds, bro. And so he trades me. So I have a pretty good amount. Well, me and my wife aren't together. So I call her sister, who I'm really good friends with, Amanda. And I'm like, hey, Amanda, I'm like, look, I need to see you. And she's like, come on over, Ben. She's just a wonderful person. Just, like a soccer mom. She's a barista. And anyway, she's a good person. And I call her up and I go over to her house and I said, look, I'm out. I'm going to Mexico. I just want to say goodbye, to Megan and my stepson, before I leave. Cause, I'm realistic. This is it. It's like, there's no Facebook, no calling nobody. It's like a whole new life. You go on the run, dude. You've got to cut everything. And so I'm like, so my wife comes over and my stepson, and I tell her, I'm like, look, I'm going on the run. And she's like, what? No, I want to go with you. I was kind of like, I was like, yeah, that's not a good idea, And now she's like, I love you. And, she's actually sitting on my lap, like hugging me and telling me she loves me. And, she doesn't want to, and so her sister, God bless her, but she's like, I think you should go with him. She's like, you've got everyone in your head all the time about shit. And he's a good man and he's taking care of you and Christopher, he's his dad. And she's like, you should just go with him. And and so I'm like, well, all right. So I decide she can go with me. So I planned this out, pretty quick. And so for about 3 or 4 days, now we're back together, and I'm getting all this money up. I get rid of my phones and I'm like, look, we're going to take the bus. So we get on the Greyhound bus, me, her, and my stepson, and we split, leave everything behind, and we just go. So I didn't want to go straight to the border. Now I'm not wanted yet, and so I'm on the bond for these bogus charges. The second charge, by the way, when they were knocking on the door and I got away, it was some old marijuana charge that I wasn't even guilty of, that they just brought up. It was just some BS to throw at the wall. So now we're down, we go on a roundabout way and I end up having a guy drive me half the way back down to the border. I'm trying to shorten it. And so we get to the border, I get a hotel. As a matter of fact, my buddy that was bringing in the Shannon had all the, anyway, my buddy that was bringing in the camp, like I said, I'm really good friends with pretty much quite a few people from every prison that I've done time with, and I'm in contact with them still. Like we're all from all over. So he's in prison still, and he tells his son, hey, you need to help him out. Like whatever he needs, legally, nothing illegal, but, help him out. And so, I went down there and he didn't really know I was on the run. And, he let me stay in a house for like 4 or 5 days. Then one day he comes like, Lou, I don't know what's going on, but I got the feds at my house and I don't know if it has something to do with you or something to do with me. But so I'm like, gotta go. So we split back on the bus and then came back around. Anyway, he brought me down there and we get to the border. Well, I didn't want to cross altogether because I'm like, the feds are probably looking for me. As a matter of fact, they were. It was all over the news. Like my buddy's mom in Chicago was like, Seattle was like, you're on the news over here. They're looking for you and your wife and kid traveling together. So I'm like, dude, so we get to the border. So, I'm going on the run. This is all the money I have. If something happens to it, like my life is, much, much, much harder. So I take all the money and I got my wallet packed full. And I got some condoms and I roll up all these hundreds and I stick them, tight down in the condoms, a roll on top of each. And I make a couple of these things, And it's kind of funny because I tell my wife at the hotel, I'm like, now listen, I'm like, I'm going to put these in my boxers and stash it. I'm like, and you got to put this in your underwear, you know? I'm like, if something happens, if we get arrested or the cartel tries to kidnap us, you're going to have to, you're going to have to hide it, where it ain't going to be found. And she's like, it was funny. She's like, why is mine bigger than yours? And I'm like, well, look where mine's got to go. Shit. So anyways, and then I had money, everywhere. It's, it's hard sometimes. It doesn't seem like that much money, 50, 60 grand, but even in hundreds, it still adds up, when you're trying to hide it on your person. And so I have some here and there, little bundles and different. So we crossed the border. So I leave her on the US side. I says, listen, I'm going to cross first. We crossed in Laredo at the footbridge. I said, you wait for me and I'll call you. And then you and Christopher come across. So I walk across the bridge. Go through the x-ray machine. They're like, yeah, cool. Come on in. So then I call her. I'm like, it's all good. Come across. And I'm watching her come across, and here she is. She's 20 years old at the time now. She's got this little sundress on. She's pushing a stroller with a little kid, and I'm like, oh God, I'm watching, like, they're not going to let her in Mexico. They're going to be like, what lady, what, whoa. And so they do. Well, I had a big, huge knife. Like a Rambo knife. It was a SOG, and I told her, you bring this in. They'll probably let you bring it in. They won't let me. And so they gave her a hard time about the knife, and she's telling them, for protection, my dad gave it to me. And so they let her in. So she gets in there. So we get on the bus and we head down to, we head down, to central Mexico, to Guanajuato, where we're going to go. At one point, the bus gets pulled over at night and there's these big lights lit up, and we're passing a state border and it's a checkpoint. And they get everybody off the bus, and I thought it was busted. They get on, and they're looking at me, the only white face that doesn't belong. And the guy's telling everyone, no. They're getting off, and outside the windows are all lit up, and, there's military-looking vehicles. I'm like, fuck, how the fuck did they get me down here? And he's looking right at me. He's coming down. He's like, you got to get off. So I'm like, fuck, all right. So I get off, and I had some weed on me, too. And that's highly illegal in Mexico, at the time, and I think it still is. But so I stash it, and I'm like, fuck, I stashed a knife. We get off. They search through all of our luggage and everybody's luggage, and then they let us go. So we get down to Guanajuato, and the first city is a place called Uriangato and Moroleon. And we get down there, and I move in with my buddy. His brother's there. He picks me up, takes me to their house. I meet their mom. She's a wonderful lady. Their dad, they lived in Chicago too, so their dad's in Chicago. He calls me up, says, hey, just respect my house. You can live there, I'm like, thank you. And so after about a week, that story's from Mexico. God, I mean, that could take up a whole another 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 hours. But my life is just always, I don't know. Anyways, so it's just always been so not chaotic, but just so alive. So much like stuff. I never really just lived a calm life. Now I am, and it's great, but I never really lived, and so I end up moving into an apartment building. I find an apartment, me and her move in, and I'm like, this money's got to last. It's not just to be blown like we're on vacation. So I'm kind of in a hurry, like I've got to invest it. So there's a big empty lot across the street. There's buildings, and it's just like a big, big empty lot with buildings on all 3 sides. And it looks nice where I'm at. So I'm like, I'm going to build a restaurant. So I build this restaurant down there, and it's called The Hideout. I'm on the run. I like to play around a little, and so it's called The Hideout. In Spanish, it's El Escondite. And my actual logo I used, so we have an indoor football team in Billings, Montana. It's called the Billings Outlaws. And they have it's like a masked bandit, with like a cowboy hat. They won the national championship a few years back. But anyway, so I actually used the Billings Outlaws logo as my logo. And it was kind of hidden around a corner, and it was like, and so I start building this restaurant, and my wife, after like 3 months, she's kind of tired of it down there, she could go with me, but she's always just like, I'll just stay at home with Christopher. And she just hangs out. We'd go out a lot. But so we start kind of getting in little arguments, and it was her 21st birthday, and, she's a twin. And so they have been planning their 21st birthday since, I don't know, they're 3 or something, who knows? But, it's like, we're going to be 21. And so I spent a lot of money actually coordinating a phone call between them. So I had to have somebody up in Billings buy several cell phones so they could call her on one cell phone, and then we could call them on the other cell phone, and they could just, turn them upside down to each other. That way, because I know, like, whenever she calls her sister, the Fed at this point, the feds have been calling family members, knocking on all kind of people's doors. Just the other day, I found out another person, my buddy's mom, was over there having dinner. She's like, the feds came here when you went on the run. I'm like, really? And her husband's like, they're older. And yup, they were here. I'm like, they came to you guys? And then I hear stories, all the time from people that are like, and they were getting phone calls. My little brother, his clients in other states were getting phone calls from the feds. Like, so they were getting into like phone records, and they were really trying to find me. And so anyways, I did this phone call for her. So she decided she wanted to come back. And I told her, look, let's plan it out. You know what I mean? Let's just plan out. And if you want to go back, that's fine, but let's get you back. So she had a warrant for a witness warrant. Like, they actually put like a warrant out for her to try to testify on me. And it's like a felony warrant. Like, they'll arrest you anywhere for it. So I didn't actually know this at the time, but I knew they were going to like catch her at the border or something. So we ended up getting in a fight one day, and she leaves. She's like, fuck it. And she leaves. I leave, actually. And then I came back. She was already gone. She got on the bus and went back to the border. And I could have went. I called her sister, and she's like, dude, she called me and like told me she's coming back, but I told her to go back to you. She said, you guys got to fight. She said she's going to come back to where you're at. But she actually went the wrong direction into a place where like the cartel was burning buses at that time. And I mean, so anyway, she goes back to the border, and I split. I'm like, I can't live here anymore. I got to move. So I moved in a matter of hours, and I moved into an apartment building that was full of prostitutes, like in a shady side of town. But that's like, there was an apartment there, and it was cool. And so anyways, I'm trying not to get, I'm trying to get in the weeds off too much, because there's so many different angles. And so I ended up starting I started a stainless steel business down there, and I made stainless steel equipment for restaurants and homes and stuff. And then I started a security business called Protection One Seguridad, and I did alarm systems and camera systems. I mean, on the run. I was down there for a few years, and I had a girlfriend, and I have a child down there now. And so one day, one of my ex-employees found me online somewhere. I had a fake name. I printed out a fake Canadian ID online, put my picture on it, and I glued it to a card from a hotel, and I made it into an ID. And that's always what I used. And my name is Jesse Cruz, because I thought it sounded white, but it might blend into databases. And so anytime I had to deal with the police or the military checkpoints, arguments with the transit police down there, it happened frequently. You got to argue with them. I was trying to get money from you, So anytime that happened, I used that. And then, so one of my employees called me up. My ex-employees said, hey, bro, you want to sell that moto, little motos? And I had one that I was selling, 2 of them, but I said, yeah. And then I was waiting for him, and I saw this truck coming flying towards me with the lights on, like a federale truck, but it was just one, and it was way down the street. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, because usually they're going like way deeper than that. And then I saw there was a Jeep behind him. And so I was like, dude, I don't know what's going on. This dude hasn't showed up. I'm out of here. So I started trying to take off, and that's when I realized they're trying to get me. So I was trying to get to a one-way street, to drive up it, full of cars coming to the way. They can't get me. And they just smashed into me. They smashed into me, jumped out. It's like a kidnapping. Now, in Mexico, when you get arrested, something like that, it's not like up here where there's going to be a scene for 20, 30 minutes or an hour. It's like, get him, throw him in, cuff him up, and get the hell out of here. So they threw me in, they cuffed me, tossed me in the back of a truck. These, federales are on me like, no muévete, no mueves, don't move. And I'm like, no, it's okay, relax, And they throw my bike in after me, a whole motorcycle. And then we take off. And so we get to the jail. And it's all the drunks from town. These guys know me because I hang out with them sometimes. And they're like, what'd you do? Were you drinking? And they're like, you could see, like, you could break out of this jail. This is just like the little drunk tank. I'm like, I'm getting right out of here tonight. And then they came and got me and brought me to another place far away, not too far away, like an hour and a half away. I'm trying to like convince these cops to let me go. These federales, they're immigration agents and some federales. I'm telling them like, I'll give them 50 grand. I don't have 50 grand to give them, but we'll figure that out later. Like, they're not going for it. And I'm actually thinking to myself, like, where in the fuck is all this corruption? Everyone's saying you can buy them off. And I'm telling them, 50 mil. Chaz, efectivo, and my cash, and he's just looking at me. One of them was looking at me in the rear view, like, and I mean, I'm actually Ian, I was actually considering like reaching up and like just hitting the steering wheel. I mean, I'm thinking I'm getting life in prison. They're going to lock me up forever. Like, I have some PTSD, and so I'm like, this is going to be forever. Like, I might as well just wreck the car and try to get out. But anyway, so I get to the place and I try to escape all night. It's like a room and there's a bunch of Hondurans that were in there that had got caught. And so it's like an immigration. So I cut this padlock off a deadbolt. I cut this deadbolt off the door all night. And these Hondurans are watching me. And then I get in the office and there's like a federal, federale, like guard outfit. I mean, like a cop outfit. I put it on and cover myself with a blanket. I mean, and then they come and open the door in the morning and I try to run out and they grab me and catch me. And they put us in a van and they drive me to Mexico City to a big prison. I mean, it's got like doors. They're like 4 stories tall, opens up, we're like this little van driving in. I'm like, I'm never going to get out of here. And so I go there and, that place was cool, man. It was all right. And I tried to escape there. I got the bars off the window and I had everything ready to go. And they basically, so I found out that they told the United States, like, because they had to extradite me. So, anyways, so look, it's kind of funny. This is actually this is an interesting part that I think you're going to enjoy. So I had been planning like all this for several years, like what's going to happen when I get arrested. Now this is January 2013. So I've been all into like the NSA and the Utah Data Center and some of their programs that they've developed. I watch all that online. I'm like, seeing, all these different programs that they have, for, listening to people. And I've been into that pretty heavy for a while. So when I get arrested, I start telling these guys, like in the prison, inmates, I'm like, look, dude, this is how they can track your phone. This is how they track this. This is how they track that. This is how you make a broadband jammer. Like you can jam any wireless signal. And so I have all this, the criminal like knowledge base, and I'm explaining to them all this, and so the human rights come to that prison, these human rights, they go to prisons internationally all the time. So the human rights guys are there. And and these other inmates are telling them, like, you got to talk to Wedo. So I'm telling them, I'm like, look, dude, they're lying to you. I didn't steal anything up there. I'm like, here's the deal. I'm part of a network of people that want to get the U.S. government to stop spying on people. I'm like, I had to fucking go and hide out down here because they were going to find out, like they knew who I was. I'm like, if you send me back, like it's all bad. Like they're going to try to like use like the sodium pentothal on me. Like, and so this is my, I'm trying to get out of prison. I'm like, dude, they're lying to you. This is all bullshit. So, and I'm telling them and the shit that I'm telling them, and at the time, they had just got caught spying on like the president of Brazil, the president of Germany, that Angela Merkel, you know what I mean? So things have been coming in the media slowly but surely. Now, by the way, Edward Snowden, you remember him, right? Mm-hmm. So he didn't come out till I think it was like May or June of the same year of 2013. So this is all timelineable. I mean, just saying, you can see that the timeline is. So I'm actually, but a lot of what he came out with was actually already out there if you knew where to look. If you were already looking at all the, the internet and seeing like, hey, look, man, they've got all this, all these programs, Operation Stellar Wind, and just, all this stuff was in there from like Wired Magazine had already had a lot of stuff, and you can go from there and you can just start jumping around, and then you can start using your own mind and realize like, okay, well, if they have these programs and it's only natural that they would have these other programs, you know what I mean? And so you're like, so, I mean, why would you not have this if you've already got the technology? And so you can start kind of building on that, which is what I had been doing. And like, all right, so they're already doing this. They've got cataloging programs, they've got, databases, and they have something, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called the Utah Data Center. And it actually uses enough power to power 250,000 homes a day. This thing's huge. I mean, and it's there. It's right there. And it's actually basically a big thumb drive. So there's like 5 supercomputers. And some of this is old information, at least from like 2013, in Fort Meade and all these. And so they get all these international communications so they can check them. You say, the word bomb and president in the same sentence, there's some computer somewhere that's like, hey, flag this. But what happened is they were getting so much digital technology and traffic is moving so much that they couldn't store it. So they're getting so much stuff in that they can't look at it before they have to delete it. So that's why they got, approval from Congress, ended up building the Utah data center. And it's like a big thumb drive. It can hold a yottabyte of data, which they didn't even have that numbered back then. So they say it can hold enough digital data for the next 100 years, like every conversation, every bit of digital data. So anyways, this is all knowledgeable. You can look it up online. I mean, it's not like some hidden secret shit. They had a big article, like I said, in Wired magazine and about these things and explaining it. So I started, telling these human rights, like, look, this is what it is, bro. Like, you can't send me back. I'm just trying to throw whatever monkey wrenches I can and slow this up. And they were like, we're not going to send you back, Weddle. I'm like, you guys should be debriefing me right now. Like, I'm like this. And they're like, we're not sending you back. And as a matter of fact, when they actually told me we're not sending you back, right, it was literally about 10 minutes later, they came in and they were like, United States, they call you out there by your state. Estado Sudense, they call me. Estado Sudense, United States. Like, yeah, like, you're leaving. Well, my poor Sally was from Ecuador, and I had convinced him, like, if they take me back, I'm going to have to kill myself to protect my, the secrets and all of the people that are, secretly in my little group. And so I'm leaving. He's like, Wedo, I don't want you to die. He's like worked up. I'm like, don't worry, bro. And then the cops are acting like I'm getting out, and they're like, hey, like, dude, you're good. Like, don't trip. You're not. Like, and so I go get in this van and they don't cuff me or nothing. And they're like, you're going to a meeting, they told me. And I'm like, a meeting? Where am I going to? I'm thinking this human right guy did not have time to go get anything done yet. I'm like, but maybe he just said, get him in a van and we're pulling. So I don't know. And then we got to the airport in Mexico City and I see a plane and a bunch of Mexican Federale trucks lined up and we get closer and closer to it and it's just off somewhere. I'm like, what the fuck? And I was thinking, man, they must be doing like a lot, like what's going on here? And then I realized, oh, it's for me. And I'm thinking, must be, they're taking a bunch of people. I didn't think it was all for me. I was like, fuck. And it turned out like, damn, it was they made a big deal of it, So, and then I saw the U.S. Marshal that I knew from Billings. And we and him had a lot of contentious little arguments starting there. Well, we were in the van and there was some hot Mexican Federale ladies in there. And so I'm in the back of the van that they put, it was a Suburban. And he's up in the passenger seat and we're waiting for all the documents for me to get on this plane. And I'm just having a good old time with these ladies. And I'm talking to him in Spanish and he's getting pissed. He's telling me speak English, like you're white. I mean, anyway, it was a very contentious, and I'm telling him like he's a racist in Spanish and they're laughing and giggling. And I'm telling him what I told him in English. And then, so he's just getting pissed and so they cuffed me up and we get on the plane. There was some incident, like I said, on the plane. With the marshal and whatnot. It was a pretty big kind of deal at the time. Probably no point in getting into all that. And then, so I land back into LA and they eventually get me back to Montana. And, and I find out too, but while I was in Mexico that there's this kidnapping charge. And I'm like, that actually blew me. When I first found out, I was at this guy's desk and he's telling me, this immigration agent, he's like, well, they say kidnapping. I'm like, no clue. I'm like, kidnapping? I'm like, holy fuck, they really are just lying about shit, And they've got it's called a red notice, which is an international arrest warrant, and it's through Interpol out of Lyon, France. And so anytime that one of the member countries of Interpol, it's like 163 countries or something like that, I don't know. But anytime they want to have like a felony type arrest warrant for somebody that's fled internationally, then they have to do what's called a red notice. And that's, and so they had a red notice on me and I see that. And it's basically, they have to have, the phone number of like a law enforcement that will answer 24/7. I mean, it's like a lot of, stuff to go through. So they can arrest you internationally because one of the member countries wants you. And so, but he tells me kidnapping and I'm like, kidnapping? I never kidnapped in my life. I've actually never had any no violent crimes. I mean, I'm like, whoa. So, I didn't really know actually what that was about. I was like, what is this even about? They didn't tell me. So I get back to the U.S. and I find out, oh, so what happened is my ex-wife, they arrested her when she got to the border, took her son from her. You know how they do it. Everyone knows. Everyone who's ever been to prison has heard the stories about they use, I mean, it's just it's a tactic. They use the kids with a woman and use them to try to influence them to give them some kind of information. And that's what happened. So they took her son. She's never been away from her son before. And she's a good mom to her kids. But yeah, and so she told him, well, he kidnapped me. And then she just started running with it. So they flew her back to Montana. They took her. Now, unbeknownst to me, Ian, they had never indicted me for the guns. Apparently, I didn't find this out till later. They didn't have enough evidence and the grand jury didn't give them an indictment. So I kind of went on the run for nothing. They were like, dude, just not enough here. So what they did, this is actually dirty. What they did is they had a new grand jury sitting. So they brought her in there. Oh, he kidnapped me. And, she's just a little pretty. I mean, it's kind of, like I said, these are power like chess moves. But, when the person that gets to move the chess pieces, is the government, they can pretty much, I mean? A horse doesn't always have to go in the same direction. The horse can be like the king or the queen, you know what I mean? Pawn can do what it wants. So unfortunately, the rules of the game, there's no more honor, so to speak. So they brought her to a grand jury. I have the grand jury like transcript. Like I actually have all the transcripts. I have files like, I have one, Megan's Lies, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. And I mean, it sits about this high of file folders. I mean, like I had to break it into volumes. And these are different times that she went and made statements to the police that were clearly false. And you can go through them and look, what? Like none of this even adds up. It's insane that they would let, it was almost like a 12-year-old just going in there and lying. And then they're like, oh yeah, none of it even jives. It's all conflicting. So, yeah, they went to a grand jury and her statement changed multiple times. First, she said I kidnapped her in Texas. Well, that would mean that they would have to indict me out of the Eastern District of Texas or Western District. You see what I'm saying? Wherever that crime occurred. Well, that's not going to work because those prosecutors aren't in the pocket, so to speak. So then it turned into, well, actually, I kidnapped her in Billings at knife point, told her I'd kill her, forced her on the bus all the way through the country, forced her across the border into Mexico, and held her hostage for 3 months before she escaped. So, I mean, had that happened, you're talking what? A Lifetime Originals movie, right? I mean, think about it. This ex-con forcibly kidnaps, a 20-year-old and her special needs son at knife point and forces them across the country into Mexico, holds them hostage for months until she finally escapes. And she said she ferreted away money. I mean, the whole thing was just like, if that was real, it'd be a Lifetime Originals movie. That's a movie plot right there. So, instead it was more like that movie Girl Gone. You know what I mean? Or was it Gone Girl?
I think Gone Girl.
Yeah. So it was like that movie Gone Girl, basically. And so they never did nothing to her, bro. They never did nothing. They actually indicted me for kidnapping her, which was a minimum mandatory 20 years in federal prison because of the minor. So I was my own attorney. So I told the prosecutor, I said, look, I'll take a life sentence if she can pass a polygraph. I said, right now I'll sign whatever you want. I'll I'm my own lawyer. I'll waive everything that needs to be waived. We can, cross all the T's and dot the I's. And they told me, and so I had a standby attorney. So he came to the jail. He's like, look, this is what they said. They said, you take a polygraph. And if you pass it, they'll dismiss the charges. And they'll investigate her for lying to a grand jury. And I actually have that document too. He actually typed it all up in a memo first and brought it to me. So I was like, yeah, let's go. He said, well, we have some time to think about it. But once again, it's chess, I said, listen to me, Daniel. And it was just early in the morning. Like he had just got this. So it was still pretty early in the morning. I said, listen, Daniel, I want you to go out to your car and I want you to call them and tell them that we accept immediately. He's like, well, we've got time. I'm like, no, I want them to know that I didn't think about it for an instant. I don't want them to be like, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? Change their mind or nothing. I said, you go let them know that I said, right now, I'm ready today. They actually had a date for when I would meet with an FBI polygraph examiner. It was like, on May 10th or something. So we went and that's what he did. He went and called him, and the next day they dismissed the kidnapping. Said new evidence has come to light. It's been and then the paper, they fall in line. It's just, and they make it sound like I still did the kidnapping, but for some reason, some shady, unknown reason that they couldn't go through with it's kind of interesting the way they do it, So, the paper in my town, they just back up, the government. And I'm always online talking about it to this day. And most people know it. But anyways, they didn't say, hey, you guys, let's look into this. That's pretty heavy right there. This girl, lied on this guy. I mean, and so, I'll be honest with you. So Ian, look, that whole situation there really affects me more than you might imagine. It's like PTSD. I don't date, I have cameras in all of my vehicles. I would never imagine anybody getting into a vehicle that I have without having my camera up and running. I've got, the dash cam with the one that faces in the cab, I don't like to date women. Anybody. I love women only, but I don't date, because it's scary. Anybody can say anything about you. And I've had it happen to me, and been arrested multiple times. And so, something like the kidnapping, and, being in prison, you see some people sometimes and they're like, hey, and, I try to help a lot of people that have got out of prison, and I really try to help them, stay out of prison. In prison, I did it. I mentored a lot of people. Like I said, my last 4 years when I really started, and I started trying to show them. And, I developed, like I said, a prison correspondence, a recidivism reduction correspondence course. And I look forward, to someday, seeing that go out.
So how much time did you end up getting?
I got the maximum of the sentence was only 10 years, the maximum they could give me. The day of trial, so they kept trying to get my co-defendant to tell on me. They offered to drop all the charges against him, which is pretty heavy. I mean, that's, his lawyer's working on him. Like, you're getting 30 years. There's nothing you can do. What is wrong with you? You better just, you better tell now. And, he's a good kid. He was like, no, I don't got nothing to say. So when we went to trial, I was my own lawyer. His lawyer hadn't prepared at all. And he pretty much told the judge that, Your Honor, Mr. McChesney's been preparing for this. So I was the lead defendant, which means that I get to go first with questioning. And the judge was like, well, you're not a lawyer, so we're going to let, this other lawyer go first. And I'm like, no, Your Honor. And he did. He got up. He goes, Your Honor, I've been instructed by my client to let Mr. McChesney, dictate, take the lead. And he told his lawyer, look, whatever Ben says, I love my co-defendant, bro. He's a good kid. I love him to death. He's a really, really, really good person. And, he just, he's a solid kid, man. He's, he had a chance to, tell on me and probably lie. They would have wanted him to lie that it was a conspiracy, which there was, like I said, there was no agreement. So there was nothing of knowledge of it, and that would have, probably got me, way more time. And he didn't, he did, the solid thing and just said, you know what, I'm going. So we went to trial together. They wouldn't let us around each other. And then after we got convicted, so I had a federal judge from another state fly in to do my trial because I was filing. I was my own lawyer, so I was filing massive. I was filing and they were just getting pissed. It was kind of like, they were like, this guy, he's filing this, and they have to respond. And then the judge has to, make a ruling. And so I was really trying to jam it up. And so they kind of bounced me around federal judges. And so I had a federal judge from Washington fly in to do my trial. So after we got convicted, it was like a few months, 3 months till sentencing, you know how that goes. And then they sentenced us in Missoula, Montana, which is like 4 hours from Billings, because that's where the judge wanted to fly into. I think he knew the other judge. So it was like, I'll go golfing. I don't know what exactly, but you know what I mean? For some reason, so they drove us up there. And then we got the maximum sentence I could possibly get was 10 years. Theft of firearms and interstate commerce, possession of stolen firearms, and something else. So The most was a 10-year sentence. There's no drugs involved, no conspiracies involved. And so they sentenced us each to 10 years. And then they let us in the cell together, and it was like a reunion. I hugged him, and I told him, I said, we won, bro. We won. Like we won, getting 10 years in the feds or under, no matter what you did, is actually a win. And when you've experienced and met so many people in federal prison, you've met a lot, and you've probably seen some numbers, some years that add up. And the higher security you go, the more larger numbers you see a lot of. And, there's kids in there, man, that weren't really doing shit, like nothing. And they're doing 20, 30, 40-year sentences. And you're going, what? My buddy Gary Settle, he just passed away. Bless his heart, man. A really, 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 really good dude. Literally by far the best dude I ever met in federal prison. And me and Gary were, pretty tight, for the few years that I was in USP Beaumont. I ran a poker table there. And, the dynamic of running a poker table in a USP is pretty interesting. You've got to have, just being real, you've got to have, people have to respect you first off, because, there's a lot of money involved. If they're going to owe you money, then they're not going to pay you if you're a chump. And you've got, Serenos and, dirty white boys, and, Aryan resistance movements. And you've got all these different gangs, Tongos, and, and you've got everything, Paisas. You've got everybody playing at the same table. In a prison that's, a maximum security prison where, there's no fighting. If something pops off, it's knives. And so, it's pretty interesting. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I took good care of my players. I ran my table good. I dealt every hand. I had chips. And it was every single day, all day. I actually started out on a garbage can because there's only so many tables, in there. And it's like there's a black table, there's a white table. And the whites used our table for the TV. And so there was a few poker tables, and I wanted to start my own poker table. So I took a whole bunch of big toilet paper boxes, and I sewed them together with ripped up sheets. So I had like a big tabletop, and then I had a blanket that went over it, and I sewed some little stretchy on it. And when we'd come out, I'd go grab a garbage can, and I had it counterweighted with books. So it would set right on the garbage can and hold down, and we would all sit up around the garbage can poker table and play poker. And this really cool dude from named Boston Bobby, and he was the shot caller for the Boston car. And he was a good dude. So I had a friend of mine named Cheddar, and he was from Billings, Montana, actually. I met him in there, and when I got in there, he was really great because he was like, when I got to the unit that I got to with him, he was like, bro, we got a Boston cell over here. You can have it. It's a Montana cell, bro. That's yours. We waxed the floor, and it was an empty cell. In the USPs, the cells are a little more regulated by the inmates. The guard will tell you, hey, you're assigned to this cell. Dude, that don't mean shit. They know it too. So they'll be like, you're going to cell 14, and you get in. When you first get in, you don't even go to that cell really. You're going to meet everybody, come say hi to you, and you're going to find out what cell works for you. You're going to go tell the cop, hey, I'm moving in with so-and-so. And they're just like, yeah, okay. It's once in a while you might get one that tries to buck it, but that's it. He can't. Whoever will come over and tell him, hey, dude, he ain't moving in there. That dude's already moving, or this dude's been going to move in there when he moved. And, nah, he's going in here for right now. And then when this dude leaves, he'll move here. Like, we got it handled. Don't you worry about it. You just put it in there. And it's like, that's what they do. So I got to this unit, and actually another white guy got me moved there. He's a dirty white boy. He had me moved in with him, and I don't live with gang members. So I'm like, no, because, you can be sitting on the toilet taking a shit, dude, and somebody trying to kill a dirty white boy comes in and gets me. His shitter sign says dirty white boy on it. I'm like, I'm not a dirty white boy. Yeah, they're cool. Some dudes are all right, but I don't want to be involved in their shit, so I don't live with gang members.
How much time did you end up serving?
10. Well, about 11 with the state.
Oh, so you didn't get any good time or anything?
I got some good time. I got like the 15%. So on the 10-year sentence, I did about 8.5. I couldn't get any halfway house because I had a state sentence for bail jumping for them bogus charges after this, which I had to let this lawyer deal with it, which is always a no-no for me. And that's why he told me, the judge is going to make it concurrent. You're not going to get no more time. So I pled guilty to the bail jumping. I bail jumped those other charges, remember, that I wasn't really even guilty of. So like the bail jumping was a process crime. And then I get in and the judge says 5 years after your Fed sentence consecutive. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I told the lawyer, you told me that you and the judge talked about it in chambers. And he's like, oh, I'm like, you got to make me a statement, bro. You guys hustled me, you know, like you lied to me or the judge lied to you, but either way. And he's like, I'll make you a statement. And then he never did, of course. So, you know, that's, you know, it's like you can't, you know, your own lawyers lie to you, bro. You know, and that's unfortunately what we live in is where your own lawyers are going to. And so, but yeah, one day Boston Bobby came over because Cheddar left. There was no more Boston guys there. And there was a Boston table. And he came over. He's like, hey, Montana, what's up? I said, what's up, Bobby? He says, you still playing poker on that garbage can? I said, yeah. He says, nah, that's your table now. So that was really cool. He was like, you can use that table till some Boston guys come in this unit. And so I was really comfortable. But, you know, Gary, I'll tell you something, you know, I don't really tell other people's stories because you know what I mean? A lot of people just have, you know, anyways, you know, stories of like other people and what they did. But those guys can tell their own stories. But Gary's passed away, so he can't. But Gary robbed a lot of banks, got like 150 years in prison. He did like 30 years in federal prison. At one time, he tried to escape from USP Atlanta with Woody Harrelson's dad. Him and Woody Harrelson's dad made a ladder and tried to escape. You know, the guy's got 150 years in federal prison. I can't blame him for escaping, you know, trying to. I mean, fuck. And he got caught. So, but Gary was very, very, very well respected throughout the entire federal prison system. And, you know, in USP Beaumont, he was like me. He kind of ran by himself. So me and him really kind of hung out a lot together in the same unit. And we, you know, kind of stood on our own 2 feet. Just, you know, we're white, you know. But anyways, but Gary was like the mayor. To see this guy work, I mean, there should be a movie. I mean, this guy saved so many lives and so much shit from happening that, I mean, every other race and gangs would come to him for advice. You know, sometimes there's some matters, you know, there's a lot of politics going on in there. And, you know, this guy stole from this guy or this guy beat this guy up or something. And sometimes it's a little gray area and you've got to figure out because it's black and white. And so everything's got to come down to like, you know, in politics, like who was wrong and who was right. Whoever was wrong's got to go, whether it's on a stretcher or whether it's checking in, depending on the severity of what it is. Them and their people figure that out, you know. And so a lot of times when there was complex issues, you know, they'd call Gary, hey, man, Gary. And he'd be like, come on, bro, we got to go out the yard. And we'd go out there and I'd stand ways because I had Gary's back, like whatever happened. And he didn't have to worry about anything, but I'd stand a little ways away and he'd over there and these guys would be just telling him, you know, like I said, it might be some black gangs. And they'd be like, well, Gary, we was wanting to know, what do you think? This dude did this. And Gary was like the mayor, he knew. So he didn't run them. He wasn't the head of any of them. They're going to make their own decisions. But sometimes those decisions can be hard to flesh out. And someone that's done so much time. So Gary would listen to both sides and then he would tell him, well, you know, that dude's in the wrong, you know, whoever it was. And then, you know, whatever happened after that would happen. But a lot of people sought Gary's advice. And he was a really calm, reasonable, you know. They did a lot of articles about him. He was in this Atavist magazine a while back, Angel of Mercy. So he ended up developing cancer. And he got over 50 people out of federal prison on compassionate release the whole time while being denied on his own and just getting sicker and sicker and just wanting to go home to his mom. Been locked up since he was young. And unfortunately, he passed away on Thanksgiving. He passed away on Halloween. So another guy I was in federal prison with, Eminem, he's from Texas. He called me up and let me know. So anyways, that's unfortunate. So
what year did you get out of prison?
I got out of prison because I left state prison. I mean, I left federal prison. They flew me back to the state of Montana, and I had to go to there. I thought I'd get paroled right away because I was been good. I didn't get no write-ups in federal prison. I'd been good. I changed my life. I've done a lot of things, and so I was like, I'm going to get parole. So I got there, and when I did finally see the parole board, they were like, no, dude, you're not getting out. And I'm like devastated, and I was like, this sucks. So, you know, I ended up the next year, I started a website called fakekidnapping.com about how my ex-wife had said that I kidnapped her. And because that affected me quite a bit. Even though I beat that bogus charge, you know, that still followed me quite a bit. I've been in several fights over it. You know, dudes are like, well, I fucking seen you fucking kidnapped your wife and kid. I'm like, dude, I didn't kidnap her. She fucking lied. Yeah, right. And then boom, 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 it's on. So, you know, I mean, I've had to physically, my life has been put in danger. I mean, realistically, especially, and I've had to, you know, sometimes that happens. And then, so, it brought up at my parole hearing. I went to parole and they're like, Your Honor, he was accused of kidnapping his wife and child into Mexico. Well, fuck, dude. Like, I'm like, this is ridiculous. And, no parole. So, conceivably I might have done some time for that. Anyway, it's a pretty big deal, really, the fact that they never charged her, like even that lady, Sherry Papini, she faked her kidnapping in California, no victim. She just faked it. She didn't say, Ian did this to me, and she went to prison for that. Yeah. And the difference is in my case, my ex-wife never faced anything. So she actually lied and created a victim, victimized me, by saying that. And when I got out of prison, by the way, now let me tell you something, Aaron, this is kind of important. The whole time I was in prison, on and off, my ex-wife wrote me. She emailed me and she wrote me, I love you. You're the best man I've ever been with. Blah, on and on, sent me pictures of the kids, and then it would stop when she'd get a boyfriend, and when she'd break up with him, all of a sudden here we'd be talking again. And I just wrote it. But one thing I did do is I printed all the emails. So I have a fat folder, of all those emails. So, for 10 years, she's writing me and telling me that I'm this great guy, sending me birthday cards. And, then I get out of prison. The day I got out, she posted on her Facebook, this is the man that kidnapped me. This is the man that, and then people are commenting like, he should be killed, locked up, key thrown away. What a piece of shit. I mean, it's very interesting, and I didn't really say anything. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lay back and wait. Her sister came and saw me the day I got out and took a picture with me and put it on Facebook. And so she's like, my own family. It's because they know she's full of shit. I mean, they all knew that. None of them believe her. Like, they're like, dude, stop it. We grew up with you. You're our sibling. Like, we know when you're telling the truth and when you're not. So anyways, I got out of prison. I finally, after I started the website, fakekidnapping.com, I got out of prison. I started writing the governor in Montana constantly. I mean, like every 2 weeks, letters. My kids are out there. They're doing fentanyl. Like, I need to save them. Please let me out. I've done all the time I can do. I'm trying to help other inmates. I'm not doing anything criminal anymore. And then finally I went to the parole board and they let me out. I got out of prison. I was out for 10 days. My daughter she was clean and sober too. And she ended up overdosing off fentanyl and passed away. That was 10 days after I got out. So I was in Florida, so I flew back to Billings, and I put her to rest. And there was really no one else to do it. So I had a really nice ceremony at a really cool place. I officiated it. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it myself. And so I did that, and then the head of the parole board told me, hey, if you want to stay in Montana, you can. So I switched my paper, federal and state, back to Montana. My state PO was like, look, dude, nobody wants you here. You should probably stay in Florida. He's like, I've got more phone calls about you than I've ever got about anybody ever before. He's like, you are not welcome here. Nobody wants you here. You're going to have a lot of enemies in law enforcement here. And he's like, I would strongly suggest that you just stay in Florida. And I told him, dude, I'm not doing nothing, bro. Like, I'll go talk to him. I went to the sheriff department, went and saw the sheriff. He came out. He looked at me. He said, oh, they let you out. I said, yeah, they did, man. I said, I just want to stop by and let you know, man, I'm not on nothing anymore. Like, I have a storied history here. And he was cool. He was a great guy. He said, come into my office. Went in there for about an hour. And he was like, look, we're going to go down to the jail sometime, and we can talk to these kids, and I'd like to do that. And I told him, yeah. And I still stay in contact with him. And same thing with some of the people in the probation and whatnot. The same thing. I'd like to go do that. So we're going to set that up at some point soon. But, and then, I just pretty much did what I could, to just let everyone know, like, hey, I'm not on nothing anymore, man. I'm almost 50. I'm tired of this. Thank God I never got a life sentence or, I'm able to still have some life. So, I have a lot of, I think there's a lot of issues with recidivism that could be fixed very easily. But unfortunately, prisons are a big business. The more people in prison, the more overcrowded, the more money that money slides off into some of these private companies. I mean, it goes on, and that's something, I mean, a crowded prison, if a prison isn't crowded, you're not going to get a lot of money appropriated to build a bigger one or a new one. So these prisons and jails have to stay, and it's a business model. Let's be real. I mean, any good business model needs repeat customers. You need people to continue to come back to your podcast or, to your videos, right? A restaurant needs you. They don't want you to come eat one time and never show up again. What business model would that be? Businesses rely on, building a customer base. And I feel like the prison industry, and it is an industry because, you've got all these, these corporations, lobbying Congress, they want tougher prison sentences and, but it's big business, man. Big things are happening. There's big budgets out there. Budgets got to be used. A lot of budgets in the federal prison system, man. A lot of people see these things like, oh, they have this program and this program and this program and this program. You've been there. It's fucking bullshit. Dude, half of those programs don't exist. They're on paper on a wall that says there's a welding program, and you send an email and they're like, we don't have an instructor. And it's like, well, you got a $100,000 robotic, welder over here, in this room that you guys installed, and no program. And I saw that constantly in all the prisons I was at, computers that would come in and get set up for a computer class that never materialized. And then the computers disappear one day and new IT guys come in, with a new budget and put in new computers. And, there's a lot of things, that make it difficult.
What do you do now?
I flip cars. I just buy and sell.
Staying out of crime.
Yeah. Staying out of crime, bro. I don't, you know what I mean? I buy and sell, I bought and sold some mobile homes, some cars, different things, and I'll be honest with you, like, to me, the secret, if there was a secret, which it never should be, about staying out of prison, for me is, I looked at myself every day in the mirror, and I had what, like, I was going to do to stay out this time. And I promised myself, and I'd look at myself and I'd say, if you fucking don't do it, then you better punch yourself in the face. And I would just drill it into my mind, these things. And it's like, don't get into debt. Don't start buying stuff that I can't afford. You know what I mean? Like, don't, get financially, stressed out. Don't date. I like, don't date. I can't tell you, like, half of the people I've met that went back to prison was some kind of issue with a relationship that went bad. They got out and they either were doing drugs or not doing drugs, fighting with their lady. She calls their PO or she calls the police or her new boyfriend. I mean, it's just a constant. And in my mind, it's like, I need to focus on me. I need to focus on building a stable foundation. And it's really hard for me to focus on that. And a lot of people, before you're stable, if you've got to worry about focusing on somebody else as well, you're now a caretaker and you have emotions to deal with. And I also, financially have all these plans. And so it's like, most of the friends that I have that have girlfriends, man, like, there's no free time. Like, they get off work, they have to go. And so it's like, you don't have time. I've met a lot of guys that got out of prison and even friends, and I'm like, oh man, they get in these relationships, and then some of them are very contentious relationships, man. And it's like, bro, you're like playing with fire because you're on probation. So if you get in an argument with your girl and something happens, you're going to jail. And it's like, focus on, so I don't commit any crimes. Another thing is, I don't hang around anybody who is committing crimes or who is criminally minded. I see people every day of my life that I've known in the past all around town. And they're like, hey, man, I've been trying to find you, bro. I'm like, hey, nice to see you, man. How you doing, bro? Cool. And I'm immediately looking for the exit. I'm like, yeah, so anyways, hey, and I hate this, hey, get my number. Yeah, I'll take it down. And they ask me for my number. I'm like, you know what, bro? I'm getting a new one tomorrow. Give me your number. I'll get a hold of you. I make excuses and I push on, man. I don't let anyone around me. I don't have friends that I hang out with. I stay to myself. I don't go to the clubs. I actually have a wet release on my federal paper. So I can drink and I can go to bars. For what? I don't drink. I don't go to bars. So it's not really much of a, great deal for me. But, I just stay to myself. That's it. I completely, and I don't get in debt. So like if I sell something, I take that money and buy something else, whether it's some drills, whether it's, like I said, I have a food truck that I bought and I put a lot of money into. I was leasing it out. She stopped paying, so I had to repo it from her. But, that sucked. That was, $2,000 a month rent that I was getting for that. But, the food truck's there and it's still worth a good 35, 40 grand. I'll probably just end up selling it soon. Use some of that money to pay towards my my restitution. And then, but I live in a camper, man. I mean, I love it. I don't want to pay rent. Rent is dead money to me, So it's like, yeah, I go get a house. I can rent a house, pay $1,200, $1,500 a month. The rent's not too, start filling it with everything that we do in life, and couches and pictures on the walls and stuff, and then I can just be broke, like, and chasing this, and then same thing with like a job, like an actual job, it's like, what do I do, man? I go get a job and then I get fired. That's the American dream. Get a job with good credit and build it up and owe everybody and get a car on credit and get a house when you're on credit. And then you're on this hamster wheel and you're like running around, and the minute the hamster wheel stops, like your life is flying. And, you're going to lose your girl because now you're broke and you're fighting about money, and then you're going to lose your car, and you've got to have full coverage insurance on your car when you have and so all these things I planned, and that's what I kind of used to tell people in prison, like the people that I mentored. I try to explain to them, look, when you get out, to this day, Ian, I'll go to like the convenience store and I just look at prices sometimes and I'm like, dude, I'm not paying $4 for a candy bar. I'll be broke. Everybody I know lives their life at these convenience stores. Like it's constant and they're getting big. Like where I'm from, I don't know how they are here, but there's convenience stores everywhere and it's like they're growing big. And because people are broke and so they get money in there and you want to feel good about yourself. You're like, I finally got a little money. I got paid. I got $200 left over. You're not thinking, maybe I could invest this and create a new revenue stream to, get financial security. Instead, they're like, shit, I'm gonna go buy me some new shoes. You know what I mean? I bought these shoes recently. For instance, dude, most of my stuff is used, bro. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Could I afford some shoes? I mean, yeah, I could afford. Most of the stuff I get is, Goodwill. When I'm a millionaire, I'll go buy some shoes and some clothes. When it is such a small fraction of the money that I'm bringing in every day, then I'll use that. But until then, it'd be like a mechanic getting rid of his toolbox. If like a car, someone lists a car cheap, I got to be ready to buy it right now. Those cars, when you got on a Facebook Marketplace, for instance, people will list a car for super cheap. It's worth way more. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you something. You got 5-10 minutes, even where I'm from, and that's it. It's gone. So you've got to be like, oh, car, too cheap. Quick scan. Look what it is. I'll track them down. If they don't answer back, I'll find them online. I'll find their address. I'll find their phone number. I'll start contacting them. But you know what I mean? And I'm like, hey, I need this. I'll buy it. I got cash. I'm coming now. And so that's pretty much it. I'm kind of in this, I have some other businesses that I'm starting. I've got some websites. And it's hard that travel. I can't leave the state without 2 weeks notice. And so, if I want to go meet with somebody in California about financing a project that I'm working on, I can't just do that. And so it's kind of hard. And when I asked to get off of paper early, I told the federal judge, I said, look, I don't even care about being on paper. Will you just take away the travel requirement, the 2 weeks? Because it's the feds. So who cares? In my mind, it's like, look, as long as I tell you where I'm at, you could have a federal probation officer come over here right now and be like, hey, man, how you doing, dude? We need a UA. And I'm going to say, yeah, that's no problem, dude. Let's go. At my hotel room, if I tell them every day, hey, here's where I'm at. This is my hotel room. You know what I mean? And the minute I don't, then lock me up. Yeah. Right? Like, lock me up. Like, if I can't. And then, you can come. And so it's really hard not being able to travel. And if I was in a bigger city, it would be easier. There's more opportunities. Yeah. But I create opportunities where I'm at. So.
Well, we got to get you to your flight.
Anyways, better get on my flight, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Yeah. You have a crazy story. You could go for hours with you. You're one of those people. But I appreciate you, man, and safe travels back.
Yeah, it's been funny, and I appreciate it too, man.